The Monday, October 28th, 2019 meeting of the Marquette City Commission is now called to order. If I can request everyone to please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with the Commission. I Clerk, if you will please take the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Campana.
Here.
Commissioner Frazier.
Here.
Commissioner Hill. Here. Commissioner Schlegel.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds.
Here.
Mayor Stonehouse.
Here. Commissioners, you do have the agenda in front of you. If I can have a motion for approval or for any additions. Mayor Pro Tem?
I move that we add something at the very last part of the agenda, item 9, and that is to appoint one of us as an NMU Indigenous representative for Northern.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hill? Mayor Pro Tem, any further comments?
No, I think it's just important to have somebody from here to be on Northern's board.
Commissioner Hill?
Yeah, this is to following up after our Indigenous, Declaration of Indigenous Peoples Day. NMU has invited us to have a representative on their committee.
Commissioners, any other comments? This is item 10, right. Okay, all those in favor of adding the item, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed by no. Hearing none, the item is added. Thank you. That will bring us now to announcements.
Your Honor, I think we have to approve the agenda.
We have to approve the agenda. Commissioners, the agenda is, I need a motion for approval of the agenda. Commissioner Schlegel.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Is there a second? Commissioner Frazier. Second. Commissioner Schlegel, any further comments?
None, thank you.
Commissioner Frazier? Any other commissioner? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed by no? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. That brings us to announcements. There are a number of vacancies on city boards and committees, particularly the Board of Zoning Zoning Appeals has 2 openings. Board of Review has 3. Brownfield Redevelopment has 1. Harbor Advisory has 1. Investment Advisory has 2. Local Development Finance Authority has 2. Local Officers Compensation Commission has 2. The Marquette Area Wastewater Treatment Advisory Board has 1. Marquette County Transit Authority 1. Presque Isle Advisory Committee has 1. Planning Commission has 1, and Police and Fire Pension Board has 1. And I certainly encourage, as I'm sure all commissioners do, folks to take a good look at those committees and to step forward and to become a member of them, because certainly you do a great service to the city, a great service to your fellow citizens, and you really help the community as a whole move forward. So your help is eagerly sought. That brings us down to boards and committees, and to welcome a new member, and that would be Amy Moss. Please, if you can join me at the podium. Amy is our newest member of IPAC, right?
Yes.
And thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And this is my opportunity to present to you the Super Pin, which is the seal of the city of Marquette. It has special powers, and I urge you to use them only for good.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Public comments. This is the first public comment period. Comments may not exceed 3 minutes per person. Please state your name and physical address when making public comments.
James Gallant, 538 Yalmer Road.
Where is Yalmer Road?
Yalmer Road in Scandia, Michigan.
Thank you.
And I represent the Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition. And I'm here to congratulate the 4 members that at the last meeting approved the marijuana ordinance. And I'm here to request that you 4 have 1 chance right here alone, this meeting, to reset the rules according to Robert's Rules of Order. A simple point of order, and then that will reset the rules. And then if Mr. Stonehouse believes that he doesn't have to go by the Roberts rules and he's not bound by that. You now have 4 votes to appeal the decision of the chair, and you still get the point of order. This is your only chance, you 4, because somebody's going to be gone. You won't have this at the next meeting. You'll have all new people. You own this commission now, you 4. They can vote no all day long. So I would encourage you to have a point of order concerning, first of all, the point of order. What do you get when you ask for a point of order? Because usually the mayor will just let Ron Keefe answer the point of order. That's out of order. Okay, the mayor the presiding officer has to read the rule onto the record. It has to then be published in the minutes. It has to be entered into a journal. Please ask the clerk if she has the journal, because I've witnessed points of order here at this meeting. I don't think they have a journal. They never do this journal thing where it's required to be in a journal. So next time you go point of order, and they'll go, oh yeah, it's right here in a journal. And there's no argument about the rules. And the other one would be the no debate before a motion. You notice that during the marijuana ordinance, you use the convoluted rules. You got to make amendments to the language. You got to do other things. You didn't get to do a friendly amendment because that's not actually a rule. And so there's not supposed to be any discussion or motion or debate before a motion. And the mayor continuously assigns the floor to the clerk. First in debate, first in saying anything. The person making the motion first has the right to that. And because that's Fred, he just gets to do that because he says he gets to. And just like he just did now, he just said, dude, agenda, boom. I'm going to vote on it. Fred said it was the agenda, so it doesn't, in his mind, he gets to say that like a unanimous consent thing. But unanimous consent is another thing. The presiding officer does not just get to make an answer and say it is the answer. There's a couple rules to that. He has to explain it. And so I would ask you to please do that because this is going to be the way you people are remembered in this commission, is that eventually these rules are going to get overturned. You're going to have to start going by the rules again because I'm going to be preparing a Attorney Grievance Commission complaint that Ron Keefe is allowing, and you said he's the parliamentarian. He sits right here and allows you not to follow the written rules. And that's going to be our administrative relief. So please do the point of order because then that could be your thing for the future and for your daughter. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'd like to reserve time to speak on public hearing number 3. It's Gary Dahlke, 304 Jonathan Carver Road in Marquette. And I believe that's the public hearing on the Cliffstyle property. Thank you.
I'm Rose Maratti. Presently, I live in Nevada, but before I lived here in Marquette, Michigan for a number of years.
Ma'am, excuse me, we do need an actual physical address.
3224 Brissa Court, Sparks, Nevada.
Thank you.
89436.
Thank you.
And why am I here? I'm against rezoning on number 3. I was shocked to find out how many bad chemicals are in that area. And I do not want any housing put there. Thank you.
Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave, here in the city of Marquette. I'd like to speak on number 3, number 7, and I believe it's number 9 as well. But first, I'd like to start off with the whole erosion concerns. A couple years ago, you as a city commission approved research and a study in what's called a tombolo. I'm curious about the results of that. It's been a little while, and this would be a perfect time for those engineering findings to be made public, if possible. Secondly, I guess my thought is, can there be a task force or separate group? By the way, thanks for listing off all the vacancies. I look forward to Mr. Campana and Ms. Reynolds when your one-year hiatus is up, and any other former commissioners to take up any of these seats. If they are so important, please remind yourself that they are important and, quote, I guess, go down in the seniority ranking of how this works. But somehow, if it's important to you, please make it important and fill one of those gaps, because they are needed. And as we've noticed, they're vital. So to get on that, a task force of some sort to study all of Lakeshore Drive. All of Lakeshore Drive exposed by non-break wall protection. I don't know how you want to describe it or what you want to do, but somehow losing half of our beach is not water rising. It's literally just erosion and erosion control. So maybe that's something more important than devoting time and effort to
Good evening. Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street, Marquette, Michigan. Couple of meetings ago, the first discussions of Cliffsdale rezoning came up, and one of the commissioners made a remark about how come members of the community knew more about it than this commissioner did. And I thought that was a reasonable question. So I went looking for a book, a reference book, to give to that commissioner with the history of the Cliffsdale property. Much to my surprise, in a town that has books on the history of brewing, the history of brothels, the history of ships, the history of shipwrecks, the history of every building, I couldn't find a book on the history of Cliffsdale. So that inspired me to do some research, which I've done for the better part of 3 months, on the history of Cliffsdale. There's 2 videos on YouTube right now that I would refer the group to. One of them is an aerial drone view of the site as it existed on a certain day about 3-4 weeks ago. I used the phrase battlefield. Several veterans corrected me. I'm now using the phrase it's a wasteland. Very little is growing except where it's grown before. The second video was posted Saturday night. It is my presentation, The History of Cliffsdale. I would recommend it to all of you, and I also make this offer in good faith with full sincerity. If at the discussion in the zoning part of the meeting on Cliffsdale, the commission makes a decision to postpone their decision pending review of further information, I would be more than willing to come in for a work session and give the presentation to the commission and any interested members of the community. There's just a tremendous amount of history there. Till I started pulling it together, it wasn't in one document, it wasn't easy to find, and it wasn't by one person. The history of Cliffsdale has been written by a number of people over a number of years. And actually, there's been manufacturing on that site since 1903, which I was very surprised to find out. Growing up here, I didn't even know that. So I make this offer in good faith if the decision is made to postpone the zoning decision on the Cliffsdale property. My position on the Cliffsdale property is that the zoning change should be refused. I can go into that later. I'm reserving time on number 3 to speak during the public hearing. But I wanted to make this offer up front, and I wanted to make everybody know those videos are available. And I'm sorry to have to say it, there's no pay-per-view, there's no advertising. You can just go there and watch it. And I hope people do.
There was good attendance at the presentation and a lot of good questions, and I'm pleased to see a lot of the people who attended the presentation are here tonight. Thank you for your time.
Kathy Peters, I live at 511 Brookstone Circle, Marquette. I went to Ms. Brum's presentation, I think it was Saturday morning, I'm not sure. I was very impressed by her knowledge and her exploration of all the things that might be considered in making any sort of change in what happens to that property. I know people who lived in that area say you could smell it. And when you smell things, something's coming up out of the ground. I know they've removed some tar, but you know, it's right by the lake, and it concerns me that if we don't remove that stuff as it goes into the lake, it's going to be polluting our water sources. And I think that's a real major concern from my standpoint. So I thank you and I think it'd be well worth your time to listen to what she put together, because she's got the expertise to understand it, and I didn't. Thanks very much.
Good evening. I'm Matt Toriano with the Michigan DNR. I live at 213 East Ohio, and I'm here to reserve some time to speak on item number 7. Thank you.
Tony Herring, 6369 US 41 South, Marquette. I wish to reserve time for item number 7. Thank you.
I'm sorry, sir, I missed your name.
Tony
Herring.
We got it.
Okay,
Tony Herring.
I got it. Thank you.
Howdy, Commissioners. I'm Ron Yesney with the Department of Natural Resources. I reside at 5 Grimes Road, Negaunee Township, Michigan, and I'm here to speak on number 7. Thank you.
Frank Jeff Arrow, 350 East Ridge, Marquette. These are my opinions. According to the current rule, participants must only state their address the first time they speak each night. The chair decides whether we give our address every time, and he's free to change the rules so long as we know in advance. October 15th, Mr. Stonehouse asked Mr. Gallant for his address during his second comment. When Mr. Gallant asked for a waiver, Mr. Stonehouse made a public stink, unaware that Mr. Gallant already had his waiver by virtue of having clearly stated his address the first time. Mr. Barber then spoke for a second time, clearly stating his address again. Yet Mr. Stonehouse asked for his address a third time, only 8 seconds later. So upon my next approach to the lectern, I asked Mr. Stonehouse if the rule had changed. Of course, he was looking down again, unresponsive, such that Ms. Reynolds answered, affirming that we only need to give our addresses once per night. October 15th, I'd stated, quote, Mr. Stonehouse grumbled when I called him out for his failure to look up during a second of that public comment. Mr. Frazier later mentioned Mr. Stonehouse's running of our meetings as an excuse for such rudeness. He claimed Mr. Stonehouse is listening, but Mr. Frazier had no way of knowing that, end quote. Now we know the truth. Mr. Stonehouse cannot listen and write unrelated matters simultaneously. Mr. Frazier was wrong. The chair was neither listening when Mr. Gallant nor Mr. Barber gave their addresses, nor when I asked if the rule had changed. The trouble is Mr. Stonehouse's confusion consumed a portion of both men's 3 minutes. Ms. Reynolds is thanked for clarifying, however, the question was asked of the chair who sets this rule. He needed to respond. Our members are urged to consider his year-long mishandling of our meetings and the public when appointing a new mayor next month. A full year in charge, and he still hasn't gotten the roll call procedure down and remains inconsiderate of the public by not listening. Ms. Hill is our soundest selection. October 15th, Mr. Stonehouse remarked on what unnamed people have told him. How you sit there time and time again. How do you take it? I could never run for public office. I couldn't take that kind of abuse. He then said of them, people who have so much to offer, great insight, great leadership, the type of people we want to have that refuse to step in the ring because of the slings and arrows they would be attacked with. And I think tonight was a great example. No specifics offered. I agree with Mr. Campana that 38% need to be represented too, which equates to 2 to 3 members per term. This 38 to 62% rule applies to more than just marijuana. I'd bet the candidates Mr. Stonehouse referred to are part of the 38%, which we've endured too high a percentage of. I've gone easy on the members who've acted like part of the 62%. Those 38% would-be candidates are begged, for the love of us all, to please not run. The abuse would be worse than they ever dreamed.
Anyone else to address the commission?
Tim Gwynn, 250 Jackson Street, Marquette, Michigan. I'm born and raised in Marquette, lived here all my life. I don't know how many of you on the board have lived in Marquette all your life. If you were around, I'm regarding to number 3 you have here about rezoning there for the Cliffdale property. If they're going to try to make that residential. Anybody that's lived in the city of Marquette could tell you about that property. Pine tar in the ground's been put in the ground there for over 60 years. The tar ditch ran into Lake Superior for about 50 years. You go on the property, you dig it up at all, and all you smell is that pine tar smell. If you never smelled it before, you wouldn't have any idea what I'm talking about. Anybody who's lived in Marquette all their life know about it. And to put a residential complex on that property, I can't believe it. Anybody that's lived in the city all their life should know better than that. There's so much pine tar and stuff in that ground, to put houses on it is just unbelievable. So you should really think about this before you ever try doing anything with that property. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, public comment is closed. That brings us to a presentation by the Executive Director of the Marquette Housing Commission, Sharon Mackey. Sharon, the floor is yours.
Good evening all, and thank you for inviting me once again to give you some information about the Marquette Housing Commission. We are going to be making a significant change in the Housing Commission, so I'm going to start out with where we are right now. How we are looking today is we are a city commission, or a component of the city, as a housing commission. Many places refer to us also as an authority. We were chartered under the laws of the state of Michigan to provide and administer affordable housing programs to the citizens of the city of Marquette. Our mission statement is quite lengthy, which I would really like to change this, and I say that every year, is to provide safe, sanitary, affordable housing to low and moderate income individuals and families, and to promote personal responsibility and self-sufficiency to residents while maintaining fiscal integrity. Also, to provide adequate and affordable housing, economic opportunity, and a suitable living environment free from discrimination, which I would like to say I think that we do a pretty good job of meeting our mission statement. Our policy, guidance, and governance, we are a 5-member governing board appointed by the City Commission, and I'm very happy to say for the first time in I don't know how long, that list of openings, we weren't included in that list of openings, so I do have a 5-member board, so I'm quite happy. Those include Jorma Lankinen as president, Paul Schumacher, vice president, John Norberg, commissioner, Jackie Stark, commissioner, and our newest commissioner, Liberty Turner. Board meetings are held on the 4th Tuesday of every month at 12 o'clock in the boardroom at Pine Ridge Apartments at 316 Pine Ridge. You can also find our meeting minutes on our website, www.mqthc.org. Our staff is continuing to grow. We basically have the same configuration of staff. I'm the executive director. Susan Hurley is my executive assistant. Heidi Rosemary and Sarah Fogaroli are project managers. Jackie Hart and Jasny Bennett are assistant managers. And then we have maintenance mechanics also on the property. The most important thing about the maintenance mechanics is that they are on call 24/7. So at any time there is an issue on the property, they do carry a pager, and they can have somebody call them, and they'll go to the property and take a look at what's going on. Currently, we own, important word, and operate 257 units of public housing within the city of Marquette. We have Pine Ridge Apartments, which is a 140-unit elderly and disabled 1 and 2 bedroom units. It is the high-rise. And Lake Superior Village, which is 117 units, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom townhouses. And those are all on a city block down by the college. We also operate Section 8 housing. Section 8 housing is our housing choice voucher program. Basically what that is you receive a voucher, you go out into the community and you find an apartment. You pay 30% of your adjusted gross income. The Housing Commission pays the remainder. Of course, there's some limitations on how much will be paid. It goes according to family size. Our funding, Pine Ridge and Lake Superior Village receive funding through the Public Housing Section 9 program. Again, I said earlier that Housing Choice Voucher is Section 8. Public housing is Section 9. We also get tenant rent and repairs. We do charge tenants for repairs that they are responsible for causing. And we do have laundry and rooftop rentals. You've seen some of our antennas on our roof at Pine Ridge. And then the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher program is through the Section 8 program. So that's where we are right now. Basically, in a nutshell, we have 257 units of public housing. We are looking at changing that, and we are going rad. We're hoping to go rad. Some of you may have heard of that. I know a couple of people have. Can you smile over there from Jenna? What is RAD? RAD is the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program that allows public housing agencies to convert their current Section 9 units to project-based voucher programs. There's a whole lot more information on there. Basically, what RAD does is it allows public housing to access stable funding by transitioning units from the not-so-stable Section 9 program to the Section 8 program. The Section 8 program has historically been much more stable than the Section 9 program, and I can demonstrate that shortly. It allows PHAs to access financing and raise debt through low-income housing tax credits and loans from local lending agencies, which we will be looking at getting a local loan in addition to the tax credits. Allows PHAs to address capital projects, which is anything that you need in your structure. Provides predictable rental subsidies. As I said, part of our subsidy is what we get from HUD for rents. It eliminates the limitation on use of project cash flow, which sounds kind of interesting, but basically we get two sources of funding. One is for capital, one is for operating, and we can't mix those. This will allow us to do a little bit of that. Provides annual operating cost adjustment factors, which means every year you get an adjustment factor and how much rent subsidy you receive. The most important part of that is that will never go down. And it provides a mandatory HAP contract. The mandatory HAP contract means that the units will be forever subsidized. So why is all of this information important? Well, if you take a look at these two slides, if you look at the capital fund is the fund that gives us money to make improvements in our buildings. Historically, it is going down farther and farther. Throughout the nation, there's in the area of $58 billion in backed up capital needs, which we will never receive. Marquette Housing Commission gets about $500,000 a year for capital needs. You can see the last couple years it has gone up. The reason it has gone up is because you'll see that bottom thing. That is what the president proposed, because what the president proposed is we no longer get capital funding at all. Again, this year's budget, the same thing. The operating, if you take a look at the other slide, the blue, that shows you where we are in operating subsidy. You can see it goes up and down. And for the first time, we are actually looking at receiving more operating subsidy than we have, or they're going to give us more than we are asking for. Primary reason for that is so many places have gone RAD. So the Section 9 isn't as important as it was. So as you can see, our capital funding is going down and our operating funding is going down. What RAD does to us is RAD mixes these. So if you look, we have your tenant payment, that's what the tenant pays, plus the capital fund, plus the operating fund gives you $792 a month, for instance. What RAD is going to do have the tenant give us $318, the same amount, but then we get this housing payment, which is the $474. Keep in mind that housing payment under the Section 8 program is going to continue to go up or remain the same. It will not at any point be going down. Tenants continue to pay their 30% in adjusted gross income. And the other important part of this is through those rents, we can leverage debt and pay off our debt. So a quick summary, what's happening before RAD? Before RAD, we are public housing. After RAD, we are going to be privately owned. The Marquette Housing Commission is going to be selling the units to a nonprofit that is made up by the Housing Commission. Through that, we're going to be able to borrow money. Right now, the public housing units cannot borrow money. We'll be able to do that. We're going to be doing that through low-income housing tax credits and a private loan. The funding fails to provide us enough money to do any upgrades. Through the RAD program, we are going to be looking at infusing approximately $12 to $13 million between Pine Ridge and Lake Superior Village. This is a one-shot deal. This is within the next 18 to 24 months. We're going to be putting that much money into these properties. If you look at $500,000, how long would it take us to get to the 10, 12, $13 million at $500,000 a year? We would never do it. So this is going to allow us to upgrade our properties to where they need to be. And the other thing is the residents also will have a choice, being it's a Section 8 program, they'll have the choice to grab a voucher and go someplace out in the community after 2 years of the RAD program. So it provides them some additional ability to relocate. Of course, they can move or they can stay. We prefer that the tenants stay. They'll have some nice new amenities like air conditioning on all their units, new windows, and some other modernizations throughout. So that's where we're looking at going. That was quick, I know. Do I have any questions from?
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner
Commissioners?
Smith?
I don't have any questions. I was on the Housing Commission right when this first started coming about. I was on for about 2 years, and right as I came on the City Commission, we just had started looking into RAD. And from my experience, it looks like it's a well thought out plan. There's a lot of housing commissions going through this now. I had the experience of doing a day-long, I can't remember what it was called, a retreat where we learned all about RAD and why we should do it and what the benefits and downfalls were. And I remember not seeing a whole lot of downfalls. So,
yeah, we did 2 strategic plannings with 2 different sets of board members. So
Yep.
we've researched this a lot. And
Absolutely.
You know how scared I was.
yeah, it's been a long journey. I know that much. And I was going to ask about the 501c3, so I was glad to hear that you brought that up.
Yes.
So I guess what would be the biggest change for the residents in your mind?
The biggest change for the residents is going to be their ability to have and secure a voucher to move to a different location after 2 years. Other than that, they're going to have nicer apartments. There's going to be several new amenities, and the apartments are all going to be upgraded, so that they're not going to be impacted for anything but good as far as we can see at this point, other than, living through construction's always not fun.
Yeah.
But
And then do you have a timeline for when you think the official RAD conversion may happen?
we're looking at, one of the big things, which, I hate to bring this up right now. We have 2 issues that are happening that we need to get resolved as soon as possible, and both of those do involve the City Commission. One is our pilot. Right now, we have a payment, we refer to it as PILT, our payment in lieu of taxes. One of our lenders, which is MISHDA, really wants to know that we are going to be able to continue on with the pilot. So we need to get that done by November 15th, and hopefully just a letter of intent that you do intend on keeping the pilot without having to do any major changes. So if we can get that in place, and then the other thing is zoning, which is obviously a hot topic today. We are building a new building. It's going to be on our property, so we're just getting sketch plans to the zoning committee, and the zoning committee is not thinking they're going to have any issues with being able to get that done by November 15th. So provided we get the funding, we get the gap funding from MISTA, we're looking at a 2020 close, and 18 months later, we will have all of our construction done.
Great. That was a jam-packed update. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Other Commissioner, Commissioner Schlegel.
Thank you, and thank you, Sharon. Great presentation. Always like a fast one and very informative. Maybe it was in there and I didn't pick up on it, but the nonprofit that this will be sold to, is this a nonprofit that is specific only to Marquette, or is it in other communities that have similar type of commissions at current?
This is a format that's utilized throughout the United States. What's happening is we are going to be selling it to an LLP, limited license partnership. Underneath a limited license partnership is going to be the nonprofit organization. The nonprofit organization has not been set up yet. We're working on getting the LLP set up. So we're a little behind track on that, but this is the normal way of doing things. After 20 years, the LLC, the reason we're doing this is for the tax credits. You can't do the tax credits unless it's owned by a private owner, which is why we have to do the limited license corporation. After the 20 years of being in this deal, the properties most likely will come back to the Housing Commission unless we do another low-income housing tax credit, which I'm hoping we won't have to.
Okay. I think I'm right there with you, but is it specific to Marquette only? The entity that this is going
The
to be
nonprofit,
underneath?
do you have to be a Marquette resident to be there, to be a member of
Make
it?
sure. Let's say Escanaba has the same thing going on. Is this same umbrella, I'm going to say, with the LLC underneath it, the nonprofit underneath it, would they be able to go into another community and do what they're doing here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is that anticipated?
Well, that's happening all over the place, because one of the big things that HUD is doing is HUD is really pushing towards RAD. HUD is also pushing towards consolidation. So I don't foresee this happening here, but a perfect example would be Ishpeming, Nagani, and Marquette each have their own housing commission. What a lot of housing commissions are doing is there would be Marquette, and then under the umbrella would be the other two housing commissions. That's not going to happen. Please, Ishpeming and Nagani, don't think I'm trying to take you over. That's not what I'm saying. But that is happening in a lot of areas. Bessemer is one that has happened to, that there, and Houghton Hancock, another place.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you. Yeah, when I was running last year, I was at the meeting where this was actually voted on. I attended that committee meeting there, and they serve food at their commission meetings, which is always a good.
My assistant's a great cook.
Yeah, it was a good meeting. I think the concerns. We've talked about the PILT at the agenda review meeting. I think that'll be, that's the payment in lieu of taxes is greatly appreciated. They take up property, so they're paying a property tax, but it's at a rate that I think is quite reasonable. And I am concerned that there could be future federal policy changes that may also, this is in response to federal policy changes. Are there entities at the federal level that we should be in touch with to make sure we know that we can be in communication with? Would be the folks that influence this process in case we feel like it isn't going well for Marquette?
Definitely. There is an organization called NARO, and it's the I can never remember the acronym, National Association of Housing and Reorganization or something. Anyway, they're a very, very, very strong advocacy group. That group on a regular basis sends out letters to our representatives, our senators, local, state, everybody, and lets them know what's happening and what we agree and don't agree with HUD. NARO will get the new legislation that's about to come out. They provide their feedback to HUD. HUD frequently tweaks what they're going to put out based on what NARO suggests. So that would be the big place to go. Definitely talk to Representative Bergman, I have been in his office multiple times, both here and in Washington DC. Every year we go to Washington DC. Actually, it's going to be the end of March this year, and Jen missed it. When she was a commissioner, she was talking about potentially doing that. The end of March, we go to the Hill and we advocate for public housing on the Hill. And there are entities that do have public house, or does have city commissioners there. I would love to have one of the city commissioners join me to go talk to our people on the Hill.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Other comments? Let me ask you two then. Is there a downside to going with RAD? I mean, it sounds like it's the greatest thing in the world, but is there a dark side?
Realistically, the dark side of it is for me. And I'm not exactly sure how thoroughly my position will be funded in the future. But I'm willing to roll the dice and do a crapshoot, and it'll work. It'll all work.
Okay, and the second question then, is this seen as a potential way that we can help solve the affordability problem in the city?
What in one of my slides, what it said is it eliminates the requirement to keep funding at a level. Public housing will never grow. We cannot do additional public housing units. It's called a fair cloth limit. We are at our fair cloth limit. We cannot build more. We cannot use public housing money to build other type of housing. As we go through this RAD conversion and the units become privately owned, any of the excess cash that come out of those units can be reinvested into the community. And that's what the nonprofit really wants to do, is they want to be able to build additional affordable housing within the city of Marquette. And being that it's not going to be tied directly to the city of Marquette, we can build in Marquette Township, Ishpeming-Negaunee. We could potentially go into as far as Escanaba if we wanted to. So it is a great opportunity for us to build more affordable housing.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like a great opportunity. I'm glad we're moving forward with it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time and for your professionalism.
And please, if anybody wants to come and visit our units, definitely set up a time for a tour. I know several of you already have done that, several of you haven't. We do have a lot of things going on right now, especially at Pine Ridge. So definitely come on over and see us.
This brings us to item number 3, which is to conduct a public hearing for rezoning of 100 Wright Street and a portion of 2001 Lakeshore Boulevard. Clerk, if you will please read the background.
Thank you, Mayor. Background: on September 17th, 2019, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing for the proposed rezoning, a zoning map amendment for municipal property at 100 Wright Street and 2001 Lakeshore Boulevard from a municipal zoning district to a mixed-use zoning district. After the presentation of the file, staff review and analysis, applicant testimony, and a public hearing, the Planning Commission made the following motion. It was moved by S. Meadowfelt, second by M. Larson, and carried 5-1, that after conducting a public hearing and review of the application and staff file review analysis for 04 REZ 0919, the Planning Commission finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the Community Master Plan and meets the requirements of the Land Development Code Section 54.1405, and thereby recommends that the City Commission approve 04 REZ 0919 for the following reasons: that remaining exposure pathways would need to be evaluated and fully accounted for by future users of the property as part of their due care obligations, while current restrictions filed with the deed to this property prohibits residential use. That restriction could be modified by the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, EGLE, if an acceptable proposal were submitted by a future owner, and reliable engineering and construction controls as necessary of this site. The City Commission scheduled this public hearing at the September 30th, 2019 regular meeting in accordance with Section 54.1405 of the Land Development Code. A motion to approve this rezoning should state that there is a finding of compliance with LDC Section 54.1405, which is an attachment to the agenda. If the property is approved for rezoning, the approval shall constitute the adoption of amendment to the Land Development Code and the official zoning map of the City of Marquette. Fiscal effect: rezoning the property to mixed use would allow for the property to be sold, developed, and put back on the tax roll. Recommendation: following the public hearing, approve the rezoning of 100 Bright Street and a portion of 2001 Lakeshore Boulevard to mixed use in compliance with LDC Section 54.1405. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Before I open the public hearing, I'm going to ask if Mr. Stakowitz has any further data that would be helpful to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were a couple of comments that came up that I feel I should address during the earlier public comment. I think it's very important to realize that I have marked 3 comments here that housing is dangerous or scary at that site. Housing cannot go there without Eagle approval, period. There's no questioning that whatsoever. So regardless of what it's zoned, housing cannot go there unless Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy approves it. There was discussion about possibly removing materials. The sale of the property facilitates that cost of remediation. So when I think of that, it's important for me to probably take 3 minutes and just give you a lowdown of where we're at. The property has been in the land use plan for the city of Marquette for many, many years. It's been in the strategic plan for the past 4 years or 2 iterations to move forward with the Cliffsdale site and place it back into commerce. More recently, the city commission, I believe it was unanimous, directed the city manager to initiate the sale of the property and negotiate terms with the Viridia Group. As that ball gets rolling, the next logical step is to prepare the land for the proper zoning in accordance with the 10 years of planning that has occurred. Because when we enter into negotiations with Viridia, the important thing is that they can get financing for the property, which means that it's zoned properly, which then gives them the ability to go ahead and make an investment in designing plans that Eagle can review. Eagle can't make a decision unless they have plans, and there's not a developer on the face of this earth that's going to take a $30,000 hit on developing plans if they know that they can't use the property because of a zoning issue. So it's been going on for quite some time. It started over 10 years ago planning the property. Okay, that's one important point to remember. The second important point to remember is this is just part of a longer process that was initiated 4 years ago with the strategic plan that followed by concurrence with the city commission to direct the city manager to work on the sale, which in turn gets my office rolling on making sure that the land use controls are in place. Subsequent to all of that, and separately, Eagle is the one that's going to decide. There's a deed restriction on the property that says it can't be used for residential unless Eagle signs off on it. It's not negotiable at all. It's in the deed restriction, so they have to be involved and they have to sign off on it. And the whole remediation process for the site, when we move Lakeshore Boulevard, we're already in the process of designing some possible remediation through a slurry wall for the site. But we can't pay for any of that unless we would actually go through a brownfield. So everything is tied together and there's a lot of moving parts. Thank you for the opportunity to kind of give a brief back on that.
Thank you. Commissioners will have an opportunity to go back to Mr. Stakowitz. Certainly we do as during with our discussion. That said, the public hearing is declared open. Anyone wishing to comment on the property, comment on item number 3, please do so now.
James Gallant, 538 Yelmer Road, Scandia, Michigan. And I'd like to just say that, as we know, state folks, they can be wrong. They go through processes, they do things, and then it doesn't work out. So it's not just them doing it. So they can't do it. They can't allow housing there if you don't allow housing there. So if it happens to be, and you're like, oh, they're gonna have plans and it's gonna be perfect. If it comes out later that it's not perfect, 10 years down the road, And people are ended up with health hazards, and they're ended up with all kinds of stuff, and who knows what. The whole reason why they were doing it all was that you approved and allowed it to be there in the first place. So like some of the people were saying, do you really want to see residential property on there with the big ifs, children playing in the dirt, their friends coming and playing in the yard, whatever else goes on, you know, in residential properties, is that you folks would be the ones that are personally responsible for changing that zoning to residential. It can be commercial, it doesn't have to be residential. And, you know, just to think that, you know, they've done other things. We didn't get a rail line to go up to get the Eagle Mine stuff up to Humboldt. We didn't get that, but it was approved at the beginning. We were supposed to get a train to go up there, not 1,000 trucks. And so things change. State makes mistakes. I think a lot of them probably don't follow rules either. You know, I've been to their meetings too. They just kind of fluff through stuff a lot of times, and then they think, hey, it goes away. Until it doesn't go away and it comes back. And it comes back 10 years later, and it comes back generations later, the people on this property, and it's too late then. It'd be way too late. And so I ask you to please consider very, very seriously your part in allowing it to go forward, at least for the residential part. I mean, commercial parts and whatever else can be there, yes. Sure, we'll find somebody that wants it. And, but to think that, you know, these Viridia folks, yeah, they're big time folks and they can do the stuff, but for them to say they're not going to do it without the residential puts you in a bind. You're the one that's got to actually approve to say those people and those children are going to go and they're going to live there. So please consider, you know, yeah, all of the facets before you go and jump on that. Thanks.
Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street, Marquette, Michigan. The recommendation for the Planning Commission to approve the change in zoning was influenced heavily by statements made by representatives of the city, and I'm paraphrasing here, to the effect that in the past 10 years, contamination on the site had gotten better, and that representatives of Eagle felt that the site could be developed further, and that we were on the right track toward a commercial development. I have reviewed the documents from Eagle. I did a Freedom of Information Act request. I received the documents from Mr. Harrington. I can find no support for any of those statements in the documents from Eagle. That's why I am recommending that you postpone this decision until such time as you've had a chance to review this presentation, which is supported by the documents I received from Eagle. Because I believe in an attempt to further the zoning process change, that statements were made in casual language that were relied upon to the detriment of the decision-making process. Example, in order to get a no further action required status from Eagle, a municipality has to submit documents showing there's no more problem. The city of Marquette submitted a no further action request to Eagle, which I read. I also read the rejection of that request. And the reason the rejection was made was multiple deficiencies in the status of the site, not just one. The one of greatest concern is, rather than saying that the amount of contaminants was decreasing, the amounts of ethylbenzene, xylenes, naphthalene, and 4-methylphenol were detected at levels above MDEQ approved levels. In addition, Mr. Harrington, in an email in 2018, says we're receiving results from these tests that are 5 times higher than the last level of testing. Therefore, I stand on this statement professionally that there is no support in the Eagle documents for the statement that things are getting better. You are talking about changing the zoning on a piece of property that is located next to a former Superfund cleanup. The worst of the worst was financed by Superfund. I am requesting professionally and politely that you postpone this decision until you've had a time to hear me out. I'm also requesting that you remember that zoning is zoning and common sense is common sense. And if the city of Marquette actively thinks they're going to put residents next to a former Superfund cleanup site, I see no common sense in that statement. And I'm asking you to give me time to persuade you. Thank you.
Gary Dalkey, 304 Jonathan Carver Road. To let you all know, I'm a resident, I'm a homeowner, I'm a taxpayer, and to the 7 of you sitting here, I'm a voter. Mr. Mayor and City Commission, you know, there's a reason the city of Marquette was able to buy this property for next to nothing many years ago. And that was because of the contamination there and the liability and the legal liability that the city picked up from the former corporate property owners when they purchased this property. And that buck in consideration was part of the handling and dealing with all this contamination that's on the said lot. Currently, there are some individuals and organizations that have taken the stance that residential development should occur on this property. We who were there when we participated in the discussions on this particular piece of property and discussed the future of it, remember well the known contaminants that were there then and the necessary for various suggested reuses of the property. Reuses, residential was not one of them. Unless and until a complete cleanup, basically haul it to Utah, is done on the site and make it safe and usable for residential development. Now, if you want to put a commercial building there, understand so. Maybe the city garages should go there. Maybe there's 100 other things that could go there. But if we're going to clean it up for residential, maybe we're going to have to spend real money. Like $10 million is one figure that's been quoted to me. Maybe it is going to be more. In 20 years, it'll probably be $50 million to clean up the site. But if the amount of money we spend has got to be economically feasible in what we're doing with the property. So, and I'm not privy to all the correspondence from the state of Michigan.
Mr. Dalkey, I must stop you now at 3 minutes.
Okay, excuse me.
Thank you very much, though.
I didn't realize I ran out.
See, Rose Maratti, 3224 Brissa Court, Sparks, Nevada. Picture this. That property is a wasteland full of chemicals. Picture the big bulldozer going through it, disrupting all that chemicals. Now it's in the air, now it's exposed again. How can you protect those people that might want to live there? How can you possibly let that land be used for residential areas? Thank you.
Matt Lutenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave, here in the city of Marquette. I want to remind you that I grew up at a time that we were We were teaching the high school seniors and the high school graduates about chemistry in the soils and in the waters. This is a time when we didn't quite know the results of things in the chemistry in the water or that. One of my favorite exams was the sludge test in AP chemistry. As much as it boggles my mind, it's that we're still doing a sludge test, and you have yet to put in front of us, the public, right now, a sludge test result by the city commission, commissioned by the city commission for the results of whether or not it will be safe for residential spaces. Mixed use is a lot of things, but none of it is residential. I can see mixed use as a small shopping center. You want to put mixed use, and we could put a really needed supermarket on that side of town. You want to say mixed use, we can put industrial stuff in there. You want to say mixed use, we could put an activity center in there. So I ask you, if it's not safe for us to go and dig an 80-foot hole right now, why is it going to be safe to put kids and families and residents in that space? 8 hours a night sleeping without proper ventilation can lead to headaches and hypertension and other issues. Those are things that happen with radon and with just normal everyday radiation in brick homes. But when you have a site that is known as a Superfund site, and you as a city are not letting residents walk on that property right now, literally, why can't we walk our dogs? Why can't we ride our bikes? Why can't we walk our kids on this property? And you tell us it's because it's dangerous. Well, how's it going to be cleaner if you dig an 80-foot hole? How's it going to be cleaner if we let the water from rainwater soak up and pull out the chemicals that we claim, that a lot of people claim to be there, but you have no evidence of whether or not it is or is not. I would love to see a little vial of dirt up here that says this is what clean soil looks like, this is what our soil looks like. If you literally are going to tell us, the city of Marquette, and future generations, you 7 are the scientists who know best about what this site is and is not going to cause harm for the future, I want to see your degrees, and that'd be great. Prove it to me. Ms. Hill, you've got a great degree. I want to see your experience come to light and say, when we dig a 40-foot hole, when we dig a 20-foot hole, when we dig an 80-foot hole, how many chemicals are being leached back into that hole? That's a simple sludge test. We did it back in high school in 1991. Why can't you, as a city, do this? Because apparently it's a pay-it-forward idea. You're about to pay Verida Group a bunch of money to do some engineering contracts. That's the yes vote. That's the result of your yes vote.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. My name is Carol Trost. I live at 1729 Elm Street in Marquette. Marquette is my hometown. I grew up here. Last month, I wrote a letter to the City Commission outlining my concerns regarding the rezoning of the Lakeshore property from municipal to mixed use. I'm here tonight to voice my concerns with the rezoning and potential sale of this Lakeshore property. One concern I have is environmental issues of the property. There's a long history of chemical contamination on this site. These environmental issues are well documented. Another is the state deed restriction prohibiting residential use of the property. Part of the process for development would require Eagle to approve engineered controls before removing the deed restrictions. I have deep concerns that this would eliminate the contamination problems with this property. I also have concerns about affordable housing if this property was to be developed. I'd like to read from the letter I wrote to the Commission on September 27th, 2019. Will the mixed-use designation provide Marquette residents with affordable housing options? Do we need another hotel? We are sorely lacking affordable, moderately priced housing. High-priced condominiums and apartments are becoming the norm here and pricing many people out of housing here in town. Meridia Group plans show the potential for up to 500 residents on the property. High-density development along the waterfront is of grave concern to me. This is a critical time for Marquette and the future of our lakeshore. We have been extremely fortunate to have a city that has miles of public beach and public access. We have seen tremendous development in town on the lake in the last 15 years. New condominiums, high-end apartments complexes, and hotels in the Founders Landing area, to name a few. In some cases, these have been improvements over the coal piles, rail yards, and other land that served a purpose 100 years ago. I am not opposed to growth. What I am concerned about is that we will have a waterfront in town that is overdeveloped and inaccessible to the public. I understand the need for a growing tax base. Services cost money. I live in the city limits. I am sure that I am not alone when I say that I am not willing to sacrifice our shoreline under the guise of the need for an expanded tax base. If you look around, we have changes in town that are indicative of changing economy. The hotel, the old hospital is sitting empty. The Marquette Mall is being torn down. Shopko is closed, and now Office Max is closing. Lots of space out there for businesses to locate. Why not encourage development there instead of the waterfront? What is being done to promote these areas? You could say that the city is not in the business of selling and promoting development of select properties. I think differently. I'm asking you as members of the City Commission not to approve the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thanks, Jeff Erdo. These are my opinions. October 15th, the chair spoke of people who say Cliffs Dow can't be done. Since I'm the one who commented, the public will know that his remark did not refer to me. I've recommended development there since 1998. The site is usable once it's remediated. Page 24 of tonight's supplement lists the main rezoning factors, the first being, is that an appropriate location for that zone? Apparently not. A chemical engineer who's familiar with Cliffs Dow warned that the levels of various toxins fluctuate, and some recent findings are near record highs. She mentioned the report from a man who's known for better reliability in public relations than most who work at that agency. We assume the recorded toxicity levels don't lie, which suggests how creepy those poisons are. If the levels are nearly as high as ever this many decades later, it's insane to rezone this property for habitation, especially with such compelling testimony on public record. Too many unknowns remain at this time. In my opinion, to rezone the site for the sake of the almighty tax dollar is criminal until the contaminant levels and migration patterns are fully known. Our state needs to tighten up on governmental immunity to hold the careless accountable. Contaminants are part of the reason why a 26-unit office park was approved at Cliffs Dow in 1998, stupid as that was. The idea was that humans would spend only 40 hours per week coexisting with the contaminants, much less time than residents spend at home. The appellant is known to construct high-quality developments responsibly. It's hard to imagine they or any entity would invest in a property with so many uncertain variables. I wouldn't spend a month on that property. Where are the appellants anyway? They need to hear this. Regardless of the DEQ findings, the developer is ethically responsible to warn prospective buyers of the site's history, including the toxicity levels and public testimony for and against. The accounts appear best told by those who work there. No wonder the levels remain so high. A number of times board members have said as of the DEQ, they are the experts, they know what they're doing. Those members sounded born yesterday. They share a commonality with the DEQ in that their true objective is to facilitate big business by cramming development down the public throats. Our wishes take priority over the DEQ findings, whether the site is deemed safe or not. Any member who votes for this ought to be held accountable for health ramifications should they arise. Based on my observations over the past 27 years, the DEQ is not to be trusted. Finally, the drawing shows that the proposed public space is too narrow. A wider strip to the west of Lakeshore Boulevard needs to be rezoned residential to enhance the spatial relationship between the development and our green space. Once the toxins are remediated, feel free to rezone the area west of a wider recreational strip all the way to the west boundary.
Hi there. Colleen Roberts, 903 Adams Street. I had not planned on talking today, but everybody's going through how much contamination there is. Now, I was born and raised in Marquette, so I do know there's contamination there. And yes, I hope you do follow through with the testing. But I have one important question to ask each of you. But first I want to say this. I realize that the city needs money. I know that, okay? A lot of things are closing. I also know that the city commission is granting a lot of nonprofits property, which could be used for taxes for us, okay? And so every time I hear, well, we only have 35% of the people paying taxes because everything else is a nonprofit, I wonder why it keeps getting to be like that. But the one question I came up here to ask you, each of you, and I'm going to use my 3 minutes, okay? Each one of you, your families, your children, your parents, would you allow or desire your children, yourself, or your parents to live on that property for a period of 5 years? That's the question. I'm not saying the rest of their lives. I'm saying, would you move into one of those apartments, no matter how grand it is, and live there for 5 years? In your heart, if you know you would not, there's only one answer. If you think you would, then you do roll the dice. But that is up to you. Each one of you has a family. Each one of you has parents. Each one of you, well, I don't know, most of you have children. You have people you care about. Would you want them to live on the property for 5 years? Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Tim Gwynn, 250 Jackson Street in Marquette. I grew up in that area around the old Cliff Dow when the railroad tracks ran through there. I don't know if any of you remember that. Ran through from there, Place Lakeshore Industrial Park. And we used to play back in the woods behind the old Palestra. Anybody remembers where that was? Behind the dome. We used to ride our pedal bikes up and down along the railroad tracks back there in the right-of-way. And we used to get that pine tar all over our feet. And then we'd come home and it'd be all over our bicycles. And then we'd come in the house and get it on the carpet. And then Ma would really give us heck for it. And that stuff is still in the ground out there. Northern put the dome in. They must have covered the ground up. But that pine tar, I call it pine tar, they call it wood tar, was up and down the right of way of that railroad track, just oozing out of the ground. The pine ditch, or the ditch over there ran into Lake Superior. It was running out of there into Lake Superior. They're changing that right now, so it runs into the Dead River. All of a sudden, that's getting changed, probably for this development. And, you know, development and big money, that's fine. The Meridia Group or whoever's going to pick up the property, yeah, they want to build nice places right on the water. I don't blame them there, but not on that property. They started digging the ground up last time when they dug up for, the BioLife project, and they started digging in the ground there, that smell came back up again. Everybody here was here at the time should remember that. Now they're going to go in there and start digging foundations for new buildings? What's that going to do? That's going to bring that stink back up out of the ground. And they can cover it back up, and maybe it'll go away, maybe it won't. But the people that get the buildings there and living in them buildings over the years, if you give them the permission to build there, then the Meridia Group goes and does that, then the people start complaining because the stink's coming out of the ground. To the landowners, it's all going to come back to the city. Then the city's going to end up paying for that. That's all I got to say. I think it's a real stupid idea to be doing anything like that on that property. Residential, I can't see it. Thank you.
Anyone else? One more call. Anyone else for public comment? Public comment is closed. Commissioners, what is your pleasure? We're going to hold 1 second.
Yep.
We can do that right now, commissioners, or we can do
Probably should
our
do it
discussion.
either do it in a motion following a motion either to approve this rezoning or to suspend the rules,
And
whatever
use
you're
that
gonna
as part
do.
of the rule suspension, please. That makes sense. Mayor Pro Tem,
I move to suspend the rules for discussion.
is there a second? I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? None, motion passes 7-0. Discussion is open. Mr. Stakowitz, do you have comments to make?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Commission. I had asked a planning commissioner to read an email correspondence into the record at the planning commission meeting, and it somehow didn't appear in your packet. So I feel it's very relevant to your decision tonight. Therefore, I'd like to read it into the record. It should have been in the packet. My apologies. This is from Steve Harrington of Eagle to Sarah Middlefelt of the Planning Commission. Sarah, in follow-up to our telephone conversation this afternoon, I've attached some DEQ brochures regarding certain general issues associated with the reuse or occupancy of contaminated property. I will try to forward you some contemporary information specific to the former Cliffstow plant site environmental investigations before noon tomorrow. As I mentioned during our phone conversation, dioxins are not an issue at this site, and the predominant contaminants are related to the historic manufacturing of wood-derived chemicals, acetone, methanol, acetaldehyde, and formaldehyde, which resulted in the generation of large volumes of waste, wood tar, and creosote. Those wastes, in the form of liquids and semi-solids, contain semi-volatile organic compounds such as methylphenols, methylnaphthalenes, as well as volatile organic compounds such as xylenes. Although chemical manufacturing processes at this property were discontinued in the late 1960s, these contaminants have been found to persist in a dissolved state in groundwater beneath a portion of the property, and a plume of this groundwater does slowly migrate in the direction of Lake Superior, where it eventually vents into the lake bed offshore of the site. The city of Marquette has undertaken extensive efforts to delineate the groundwater contaminant plume and also performed a large-scale source removal in which many hundreds of tons of buried tar were excavated and transported off-site for proper disposal. In consideration of potential exposure pathways on the upland portion of the site, contaminated drinking water ingestion, direct contact, and inhalation would be relevant in any risk assessment. While the drinking water pathway is currently accounted for, with groundwater usage for consumptive purposes being prohibited by a restriction filed with the deed to the property, remaining exposure pathways would need to be evaluated and fully accounted for by future users of the property as part of their, in bold, due care obligations. While the restrictions filed with the deed to this property also prohibit residential use, that restriction could be modified by this agency if an acceptable proposal were submitted by an owner or operator willing to commit to reliable engineering/construction controls and or additional modified restrictions supported by detailed contemporary knowledge of environmental conditions at the individual property. I hope this helps to generally summarize our conversation, and I'll try to provide you some more specific site information tomorrow. Thank you for your interest in this matter, Steve. I just needed to read that into the record. And he mentions due care obligations. If I could for just a second, I think that's very pertinent to the discussion because there was concern by public comments about if you go in and dig up the site and release things. Part of the due care obligation is to do no further harm. So, for instance, when we are moving Lakeshore Boulevard this summer, part of our due care obligation in that construction contract is we have to dewater some areas where we're doing actual digging and treat. So we have to pump to the wastewater treatment plant and treat it so that it doesn't evaporate into the air and cause all kinds of problems and things like that. That's an example of a due care obligation. Another example of a due care obligation is similar to, if anybody's had a house that has radon in it, you have a ventilation system that takes that air and it shoots it out the roof and up into the sky. Those are due care obligations to protect the health, welfare, and safety of future users of the property. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioners, what is your pleasure for discussion? I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith?
I think that's one piece that the due care obligations, Dennis, that has everyone kind of worried the most, because most people don't understand how that works and how it can be done. I was on the committee for the cliff style, the initiation of looking at the bids that we did have out there. And some of the other things that were talked about were a 6 feet concrete barrier. Not that this is what's going to happen, but options available to a developer. Another would be like no gardens on the property. Could you possibly think of some other examples just to help people understand the types of things that could be put in place?
I would be glad to. And again, these are engineered controls, and these would have to be approved by the Eagle. I'm so used to saying DQ, but we can still call it DQ, right? It's so simple. DEQ would have to approve the engineering controls based on an individual site basis. And there are a number of things that can be done to address the environmental factors for people that would be living within a structure, you say, for a number of years that could inhale any bad materials or something like that. There are reactive, they have vapor intrusion barriers, okay, which is what the commissioner reference, which is essentially thicker concrete. Along with the vapor intrusion barrier, there could also be, the email mentioned other restrictions. There could be no residential units on the first floor. It could only be like parking garages or something like that. So in addition to the additional concrete, you're creating another full story of separation for any potential issues with air to evacuate. Then you have the more active systems like I had just referenced with the radon. Similar to that, it's a blower system that vents out the entire house from the foundation so that it doesn't even enter into the home. There would also be potential deed restrictions for the rest of the property. Say if DEQ were to bless the engineering controls for the construction, then once you get out into the common space in the property, it would be capped and filled, very similar to what Lakeshore Park Place was. Lakeshore Park Place was actually very similar to this site, as was the Picnic Rocks condominiums that are out there. If you notice, it's kind of elevated. It's because they had to bring in a certain amount of fill to cap the soil. And then once they cap the soil, there are deed restrictions that could be put into covenants for the housing portion of a development out there that would say you can't have any gardens and things along those lines. So there's a number of ways that Eagle would address that.
Mr. Campana.
I would think, first of all, none of us would want to live or have people we know living on contaminated property. If we sell this property, we want it to be livable, clean. One thing I'd like to state is the shoreline, the property between the road and the water will be open. It's going to be public property. That will not be used for private housing. What we're doing tonight is we just want to get the rezoning set on this. That is what we're going to vote on tonight. Because as it was mentioned earlier, we can't move forward, we can't do anything until we get the rezoning set. Whether we do that or not, that's what we're trying to accomplish. If you look at the community master plan, the strategic planning as was mentioned, selling the property is what has always been intended to do. The contamination has always been bad. The city's been very good about trying to get rid of it. What we don't, what I wish we, another thing, some comments were made about the DEQ siding with industry, the builders, the city. That is not true. The DEQ is separate from us. They do not care, or they are not working with us to make this property saleable. The DEQ, DEQ, they're a scientific body. They are engineers. They are scientists. It should really be simple. They have statistics that show, is it safe or is it not safe? It's simple. You have levels. You have levels. It is or it isn't. People have studied this for years. This isn't the first time. I wish we had somebody here from DEQ tonight with a list of statistics. Mr. Stakowicz gave you a couple statements there that I think pretty well cleared it up, that it is, we are working towards being, reaching a level where it is safe. We're not there yet maybe, but we are working towards it. I'm saying we have to trust, the DEQ, we have to trust. There's a tri-media that's doing sampling for us, I believe, and we have an environmental attorney who's watching over this. You know, this isn't hit and miss. We have, you look at the statistics. Is it good? Is it not? What's in there? What isn't in there? How far down can we go? If it's acceptable, you can build on there. It's that simple. To me, it's like, can you or not? So, you know, we need to see the statistics. I just got to say, I mean, I would be in favor of voting for this if we can get the assurances that the property is safe. And I think that's what everybody wants. As long as someone can come in here, DEQ, Tri-Media, somebody come in here and say, these are the levels. Yes, you can build on here. Yes, the kids can walk around in their bare feet. If they say that, then I'd be all for it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. My question kind of is that I asked myself about this property is when we're talking about it is, would we rather leave it as is? Because right now, if we don't do something like this or rezone or talk about rezoning, it's just going to stay. Still polluted or not, safe or not, it's going to stay in the exact same state it is right now. Where if we have something come in, we have the Verdia Group come in and they go and assess this property and they're going to do the due diligence. People aren't going to just let them build. Just go right ahead, have a good time. That's not how it's going to go down. So when I ask myself that question every time, I'm like, how are we going to find out that information without the city of Marquette paying millions of dollars to do so? Well, we have somebody go and do that for us, essentially. I mean, that's the due care. They have to go do this stuff and look at it before we're allowed to do anything. So that's kind of where I put my headspace in. I don't think necessarily we're saying go ahead and do what you want. We're saying that let's do this the right way, and that's kind of where my headspace is. I do have a question for you, Dennis. As far as like you brought up that Lakeshore building project before, and you said that was kind of very similar to this project. The Park Place, sorry, Lakeshore Park Place. That.
Yeah, Lakeshore Park Place was built on, a portion of it was built on the former Lakeshore Inc. property. And there was fill that had to be brought in. There were due care obligations that had to be met for the developer of that property, the DEQ due care obligations for the health, safety, and welfare of the people, as well as the Picnic Rocks Point, the more recent individual homes out front. I believe there's like 2 feet of fill placed on top of that property, and there's other due care obligations that needed to be addressed there.
Okay, so my follow-up is this the same process we went through on those properties too, as we rezoned it back? We rezoned it to residential, so this process could be undertaken?
Yes.
Okay. That's the questions I wanted for the moment.
Anything to say? Oh, I'm sorry, Jen?
Yeah, so, several things to say. I think there's some unpacking to do if I can. So I think there's kind of two questions going on. And I like that, leave it as it is or change it. My question is, what problem is this development solving? Which is sort of related to that big, stepping back from the big picture. Because I think one thing that's going on is things come to us property by property, and that doesn't address this feeling that we have that we're losing our lakeshore. And it's been referenced a number of times how it's been a decade and things have been going on for years, and changes have happened, and lacking that comprehensive plan, folks do see these things being chipped off one at a time, and I think that promotes a feeling of unease. That's what's happened in this community. As some of you know, I spent 13 years in Massachusetts, where I had the chance to study environmental planning and ran a brownfield organization, and had the great benefit to learn from people who went through something where their community had contaminated groundwater and kids really did get sick. Kids got leukemia, kids died in Woburn, Massachusetts. It's a book, it's a movie, it's called A Civil Action. You're all here tonight because those folks stepped up and spoke up. You're here tonight stepping up and speaking up. I just want to say thank you. I want to say yay, democracy. We're not allowing people to be harmed in ways that used to happen in the 60s and 70s and before. So I wanted to honor that. But going back to, and even before that, just a woman named Lois Gibbs and Love Canal, New York. If you don't know about Love Canal outside of Buffalo, that's also why we're all here tonight. Why do we have a Superfund law? Because a woman stood up and said, my child got deathly ill because of chemicals. So yes, we hear you. Yes, this is real. Yes, these things have happened in our country, and we don't want them to happen in Marquette. We have had successful developments of brownfields in this community, but they keep happening in spaces that we find really precious, and now we're maybe running out of land. That's kind of what's going, I really feel that sitting up here. And so what problem does this development solve? Why is it in the strategic plan? Because we want more taxable land. I do think, no one has flat out said that, but I feel like that in my year here now, I keep, it's 50%. We have 50% taxable land, is what we have. The rest of it is not taxable. So yes, I think, and it's been said sort of at different times, but this is happening and it's in the strategic plan because we're trying to get more taxable land. And I agree with the person who said, why aren't we focusing on these other big parcels that just in the last year of my time being up here have gone vacant? And okay, we're getting a little bit of tax dollars from that. That's not that when they're vacant we don't get any money, and I don't understand. No one has actually sat down and said to me, this is what's happened to the money, because, we know we lost We Energies, but then, yeah, the hospital and the mall and what they are, Shopko, Office Max, Riverside. This lack of comprehensiveness, except to say it's in the strategic plan, and the strategic plan is about getting us more taxable land. There's that. And then on top of that, what's our future look like with the lake levels that are doing who knows what? I am really, and you're going to hear more about this later, I am really concerned about that. We are not now planning for what that lake may or may not do. But we are going to be paying for it, a lot of money, and so I'm really concerned about that. And so here we are developing on the lakeshore when we just don't know what's going to happen out there. And even if we put that buffer in, what's going to happen out there? And we're still going to have, the roads are not going to be connected. I'm very concerned about that. And so and then you get back to the narrow question of zoning. And they have put restriction after restriction after restriction on this. And I do believe that the federal and state officials are absolutely doing their best to maintain the standards that were enacted in the laws. That is absolutely true. I do have faith in that. But I can also tell you that if we, as a city, did release the numbers, that is one of the magic ways to help people not feel so concerned. Go ahead and let people see the numbers. That is critical to building trust. People don't feel trust right now. And so if we can do this development in these narrow set of restrictions that we have, and believe me, I know the Planning Commission sweated over what the language was, and we say, okay, it can happen in this narrow parameter. The last piece, the last point I'm going to make, is a plume is liquid. And so the way what I learned at MIT is when you're dealing with a plume, you are dealing with it forever. It's water that has to be managed forever. So there's no like pulling that all out of the ground, especially when it's sitting next to a Great Lake. So whoever takes that property on to be developed is committing to forever managing that plume. That's money. It can be done. It can be done. We've built on the Lakeshore Place. Holland is mostly underwater. And, jumping out to a country that has built itself and has had a thriving economy, and it's fundamentally underwater. It can be done. We can manage these things, but it costs a lot of money. And which points me back to, why are we developing here, and why aren't we developing in places that are easier?
Excuse me. That's not appropriate in the chambers, but thank you for your sentiments. Commissioners, anyone else? Commissioner Frazier?
I'll throw my 2 cents in for Fred. I've been here my whole life. My family's been here my whole life. I've ridden my bike out to the island many times, been by Cliffsdale many times. Never played out there like some of the people rode their bikes to. They got tired of their bikes. I remember the old yellow brick building and stuff like that. And I used to, when I lived in the south end by the power plant, in South Marquette area, I used to go to Founders Landing all the time. There's a railroad yard. I used to go on there with my friend, collect pellets, go to the junkyard. There's a junkyard behind Mr. Donuts, just right up down the railroad yard, just all kinds of things. Now Founders Landing, and I was the construction company I worked for, they supply concrete. Well, another company, excavating company, supplied fill. That whole Founders Landing was all flat. As you remember, it was a railroad yard. And it's all been raised up. The city built the road through there. I was on the commission back there, just a resident, but they developed the whole area, put all the water, all the sewer, everything in front of it is all encased in concrete, like a tunnel. And they put all kinds of lots of fill, like Mr. Secretary has said. There's different ways of doing things, That's what all our building in Founders Landing is almost all concrete walls. The reason why they do that is because it's hard for chemicals or water to penetrate concrete walls. I know this because one of our local contractors did a development over in Munising. There was an old school or something like that built into a hole, lots of water. They added something to the concrete to make it waterproof from the inside out. And I didn't know anything about it. A friend of mine that works for construction downstate said it's a great product. He put it all the time in walls. 6 feet of standing water on one side, absolutely dry on the other side. It won't penetrate. I said, wow, that's amazing. He said, yep, it's good stuff. So, like Ms. Sasha said, we're not going to build the road through there first. And I mean, for a long time, since I've known, it's been just collect leaves, dirt, grass, everything. So the property level is raised up. Now, Founders Land, I remember they put a lot of fill in there, and then that's probably, I wasn't involved in the commission, but I think that's why the condos, they approved the condos to build a certain height, but they didn't account for all the fill being in there. Now, if you see the new hotel going up, you see bulldozer, but all that's been filled in first, and they brought more fill in and dig into good sand, not the bad sand. So, people are saying 80, 90 foot hole. There's no going to be 80, 90 foot holes at all anywhere. be all, and Mike Gensler said the road's gonna go up at least 6 feet through the property, so it'll be up above all the bad stuff, hopefully. And so he's gonna build a road through there, and then after the road gets built, we're gonna take care of the lakeshore. The lake's not going down into him, so it's up to record levels. And so we're gonna take care of the lakeshore after the road's built. We got grants, we got engineers, everybody working on that. You're not gonna lose lakeshore, you're gonna gain lakeshore. They're talking about adding beach, retaining walls, some dunes, beach grass, similar to what's out Lakewood Lane, see along M28, similar to that. Beachfront, so you're gonna see he's gonna get more beach out of it, you know? And that's gonna be done down the line once the road gets built. And then who knows, when we're developing the road, something, maybe smells come back, maybe the company that wants to rezone the property decides to not do it. I mean, they were willing to work with the hospital to redevelop the old hospital. Something happened there and they decided not to redevelop it. So things can change very easily. And the city's working very hard. I feel that they're working with engineers, people, and DEQ is not a pushover, trust me. I know people that just can't get codes, permits, all that stuff. DEQ is very picky how they do stuff. You want to build anything near a river, a walk, or anything, you have to get all kinds of permits and pass a bunch of stuff. The city dealt with that. Just they had the river that flows through by the new hospital. We had to rezone that and make it better. Even though it was just a creek before, we had to make it like a full river and build bridges over it and everything, because the DEQ said, I'm not going to do anything with those. So I have trust in DEQ. They're not going to let us down. And there's chemical engineers out there. And we'll get somebody out there. And maybe, Varda takes ownership of the building, the property. They know what they're doing. They've done Founder's Landing. They dealt with that. Then there's the old bunny bread that sank vacant for a long time. Yes, it made bread, but I'm sure there's a lot of chemicals in that building too. Now look at it. It's a beautiful plot. So the companies, if they get ownership of the property, they're going to hire somebody to test it for them. They're not telling people, we want you to move you there. Maybe some people won't move there. We don't know. But I think it's going to be as safe as possible for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I think you had a comment?
Thank you. I'd be willing to answer questions if Commissioner Hill was actually inquiring. So if you'd like me to do that, I will.
Please.
Okay. First of all, I respectfully disagree. I mean, this is not a discombobulated plan. Communities, at least successful communities, create master plans through their commissions that include actions like this, so that the staff follows the direction of the commission. This has been in our master plan for many, many years. It's been a goal of several city managers and city staffs to try to accomplish. So it prevents us from just doing what we want as a staff. We follow this plan like it's our Bible, like it's what we are charged to do. So we're just not throwing this out there as something just that, hey, let's do it. I will admit that, doing it now is probably something that we weren't exactly planning on, because the funding has not been available until now. But now, because funding is available, we are asking the commission to move forward with something that's always been there. What problem is it solving? Well, it's fulfilling our master plan. 1, 2, it's putting, and I will admit, it's putting city property into private hands. It is potentially creating a brownfield plan that will help us with our matching funds related to the movement of the road, which is $3 million, which I think is a burden that anybody would appreciate being placed on these property owners as opposed to the rest of the city. It will actually create more public space for the public, because by moving the road inland 300 feet, the land to the west, to the shoreline side, will be expanded. The plan we are putting forth and have put forth accounts for rehabilitation of the dunes, some public space, armoring of the shoreline to prevent what we are witnessing through erosion. Again, we're doing that through coastal engineering firms. We're not just winging that one either. The reason we are moving on these properties as opposed to Shopko, the old hospital, or any other properties is because we don't own them. We do own these properties. And we are taking action on what we own. Those properties are in private hands. It's up to the private developer or private owner to refurbish, resell, repurpose those. And as a side note, I'm very confident because of the condition or environment in the community, those properties are of high value and they will likely be reused sooner than later. Excuse me. In the last one, I made a note, and if I didn't hit all your questions, please remind me, but the numbers that you refer to, I'm assuming are the numbers that of the contaminants. Is that what you were referring to, the numbers? Why do we make the public numbers?
Yeah, thank you. The trust in the numbers question, I think, has to do with what has been found, and then what do those numbers mean? Because long time folks know it was really, really bad, and so what was it? What has it been moved down to? How's it changed over time? I think and then I think again it's not because I think it's just when it's an unknown, it just looms out there, and so saying what they are and saying exactly what they are, and understanding that sampling has margins of error, and then because it's next to the lake, it does seem to be changing quite a bit. I've worked on properties that weren't next to a Great Lake. You don't have things fluctuating so much. There's something else. I think the lake is influencing this. So that's what I meant.
Okay. Well, two points I want to make. One is that there's a very extensive report available to the public, and I apologize, it's 800 pages of testing and numbers that I admit I don't want to read, and if I read it, I don't know that I could understand what it says. But if people in the public want to read what's there and what's not there and how it's being dealt with, you're welcome to it. It has been submitted to the DEQ and is available through the public access. And I forgot my second point already, but.
Well, and if I may then, it wasn't that I think it's discombobulated. You guys are thorough. That is not the issue. You're marching to the goal. There's no doubt you're marching to the goal, but I think the community's going, wait a minute. This goal you settled on 10 years ago, now we see things being filled out. Is this really where we want to be now? And maybe press pause and say, well, okay, now we're here. Where do we want to go next? I think is what I've seen some nodding heads, people on TV. There's a whole bunch of people nodding their heads to that statement. That's what I feel. That's what I heard when I was knocking doors. No, stop it. Stop it. Stop the development. That's what I heard. I'm sitting here.
Well, this development is finite. I mean, this is basically our last piece of city property other than what's been agreed to be sold in Hartwood. But we, geez, I lost it again, but
so
numbers, go ahead.
Please, Mr. Schlegel.
Thank you, City Manager. You answered took away a lot of my, I don't want to say thunder, but a lot of very, very important topics were answered right there. Yes, Colleen, I would put my kids, myself, and anybody else that I loved or hated on that piece of property if this process is followed properly and the notifications are given so that we can do it in a trust manner, in a proper way. If it does not come out to give those levels that we need, then absolutely not. We wouldn't vote for it, not one of us up here. But we can't get to that point without this next step, without putting these pieces in front of each other in order to get to the next determining, the next test, basically. Some of these areas are going to be set back 100 yards from the existing road, which we can't use right now because of the erosion. The other brownfields, I want to keep bringing this up because those caps that were put on those areas are there for a reason. They're there to absorb some of the building that's going on. We're talking about, a good example I think Mr. Stakowitz brought up, was half of a parking area would be built into that berm. The rest of it would be built on top. Minimal amount of invasive digging and planting of these buildings. We're not digging down 80 feet. We're not digging down 60 feet or anything like that. Most of this stuff is going to be on top. We sat down, a couple of us plus the city manager and the mayor, with the potential developer, and they said, here's some ideas as how we would build this. We're not going to sit, knowing that there's a plume in a certain area, we're not going to build on top of a plume. Anything that might need to be monitored or tested in the future will be avoided as far as a build point, and will be capped properly and monitored and tested. If I'm not mistaken, I'd like clarification from the city manager on this one. Every so often, I don't know what the regulation is there, but even with Viridia Group buying this property, the city will continue to test the levels in the plumes and on the property. Am I correct with that?
That's correct, and the city will continue to be responsible for the contamination.
So there's the forever clause that came up earlier that was brought up, okay? It's got to be tested. We got to be responsible for this stuff if we get to the point where it's being built upon, okay? If it's not and it's left to sit, we're still going to be testing it because we're responsible for that property. There will be no build areas basically out there is my point, where you would not want to put a building for whatever reason it might be. A list of many I'm sure that that Eagle will have. This is right in line with your generation, Colleen, Carol, Tim, Gary, all these people that are lifetime members of Marquette. I totally respect everything that you guys are bringing to us. I grew up on the water in Menominee. I spent my early years there. I've been up here for over almost 30 years now. I've been through the process of redoing the city master plan. I understand that your generation were being exceedingly responsible by putting in place restrictions for building. That's why we have a bike path. That's why we have access to our shorelines. All of us. Not just the people that live in Founders, not just the people that live in Park Place, all of us. So their forethought, their thinking way beyond when I was coming up here is what I'm trying to respect here and to continue on and pass on to the next group that's going to be sitting up here, whether it's next week, next month, or in 20 years from now. So that's the stuff that we really need you guys to understand that we are paying attention to. We do respect the history that's been going on here. Some of us have a little bit more than others, and a lot more worldly experience in certain aspects, but I can tell you right now that you go through that master plan and it is well written, and it is very responsible to the people that live in this community. Thank you for making the point, City Manager, that we don't own Shopco, the hospital, all these other buildings, at least not yet. Man, I'll tell you, I wish we did. I wish we owned every parking lot that MGH has over, not too far from here, and all those other lots, that we could start building these smaller homes that people can afford, instead of these, $500,000 behemoths or $1 million whatevers. Affordable housing is a buzzword that we couldn't wrap our head around. We're not going to be able to do that for quite a while yet, as far as the city of Marquette and its growth. But right now, I can tell you that there's lots of opportunity, and we'll get there eventually. But we got to have time, and we got to go through the process, and we need you to be patient and work with us, and know that we're respecting not just the time that I've been here in the 30 years, but the time from our founders that goes way back. I can't drive that home enough. I think that there's a lot of eyes that look up here and they don't see somebody that they know well enough to go up and shake their hand And for that reason, they don't give them enough respect that they're following through with the history that has made Marquette.
Any other commissioners? Well, let me, absolutely.
I apologize, but what I lost my sense of thought on last time was, and it's somewhat relative to this discussion, is that we've received one grant already to move the road in this area. We are meeting this week in a telephone conversation with FEMA, which is the second grant, which is also for $2.8 million in addition to what we've already approved. And we're moving ahead aggressively with these grants, and we feel very confident this second grant will be granted to us as well. So that's all I wanted to point out.
Let me ramble for a bit. It's hard being mayor because you really have to kind of lay back and not really participate, I think, the way you'd like to, but doing nothing is not an option. Doing nothing is not an option. Whether the city was smart or not smart in buying the property doesn't count. I mean, that was done before any of us were here, and that's a done deal. But the DEQ also about 10, 12 years ago, and Mr. Stackwitz might correct me on the price, came back to the city and said, okay, guys, you bought this property. We know it's got some contamination problems on it. You deal with it. We'll help you, but you have to do it. And the city has been assiduously doing so for the last 10, 12 years. I don't know how many test holes we've drilled out there, but have you got a guess, Mr. Stackwitz?
Well over 80 different wells.
Absolutely, and we've been doing that constantly to monitor what's out there, figure out with the DEQ how to best handle it, how we can best move it along. Because doing nothing means we do nothing. And any problems that are there not only stay there, but they continue to be problems. But by an aggressive use of working with the DEQ hand in glove and what we potentially can develop, cannot develop, how we can return it to a status of providing some taxation to the people in Marquette, trying to replace that $3 million hole that used to be We Energies, and that's what we've got to fill every year. That's what we need to do. Then this is an option to do that, and to do that in an extraordinarily safe environmental way. I call your attention to this. The same thing was done, greater or lesser degree, with Founders Landing. The same thing was done with the other development near Pictured Rocks, as Mr. Stackwitz indicated. This is not rocket science. This is good field engineering that the DEQ does all the time, will help us do it correctly, and to do it with the developer who also, again, has a tremendous reputation and proven record. Let me take just a different angle on this, because I've heard the comment made, well, who would ever build on a Superfund site? How bad can we be? How stupid can we be to do that? 10 years ago, I was asked, I was a city commissioner at the time, and I was asked to go down and speak to the Great Lakes Commission. And the basis of the program I gave to the Great Lakes Commission that they asked for was, we have 12 communities in the Great Lakes area that are coming out of Superfund status. Places like the River Raisin, places like some areas in Detroit, and what's the river that goes on up by the steelworks? River Rouge. And their reputation is so bad that these folks that live in these communities have absolutely no status, no positive thought of themselves. They can't develop the land. They can't get people to come and visit them because of the stigma of having been a Superfund site. Now, Marquette, they wanted, again, a representative of the city, I was the one who did that, to come down and talk to these communities what we did. In similar circumstances, similar conditions of contamination, and brought these sites along to the point where they now were productive members of this city. And that I would submit to you, Matson Park, Founders Landing, the developments, again, as Mr. Stackwitz indicated, up by Picnic Rocks. This is just one more step along the way. So you've got to have a little faith. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in what we can do. And you've got to believe and understand that no developer can do anything out there, will be allowed to touch a bucket of dirt if they don't have the approval of the DEQ to do so. That's the step that will be very important, that we all have to watch for all of our health and safety as we deal with any site of contamination. And oh, by the way, the Superdome, Superior Dome, that's built on part of that property too. And Northern went down 5 or 6 feet and carved off a tremendous amount of effort there to stabilize that property too. BioLife was another one. It can be done, and it can be done safely, and this is an example of that. I have rambled enough. I thank you for your patience.
We need a motion, Your Honor.
Commissioners, I think it's time to call the question.
No, we need a motion.
This will need to be a roll call.
There's no motion.
There is no motion. Well, I mean, in other words, have the vote. So we'll, I have everybody's agreement on that? Madam Clerk?
No, I need to make a motion.
You need to make a motion.
So, well, somebody does. I'm offering.
Okay, make the motion. Get us out of this thing.
Okay.
You've been here too long.
I move that we approve the rezoning of 100 Wright Street and a portion of 2001 Lakeshore Boulevard to mixed use in compliance with LDC Section 54.1405.
Is there a second? Commissioner Frazier?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem, further comments?
I think that I think all of us got our thoughts out there.
Mayor Pro Tem, or excuse me, Mr. Frazier?
You can go my Mayor Pro Tem if you want.
We'll get it straight. Any other
But
commissioner?
You can do it, but hey, I think it's a good idea.
Mr.
Let's
Smith.
get it going, and we'll be good in the end.
Okay.
I agree. Madison Park's a good example.
Commissioner Smith?
I just want to go on record and say that I do approve changing the zoning. This is not an endorsement necessarily of the sale of Cliffsdale property. That will come later. I want to be clear about that I'm going into this with an open mind, but I want to see what comes back when Viridia has the chance to kind of look at things and see where we're at.
You are correct.
I have one. Okay.
What?
Can I comment on the motion?
Yes, you may comment.
I say this with, I hesitate a little bit, but, so a committee was formed to look at this property. That committee met. I'm on the commission. I don't know what happened. Now, I have a lot of respect for my colleagues. This is not to, but it's indicative of, I think, the marching toward a goal as being the best approach to getting something done versus maybe slowing it down a little bit and informing everyone so that there's more trust that can be built. And so again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I really am not. But I'm just pointing out that I think it's symptomatic of why all these people are here tonight and why we're still here at 8 o'clock and we still haven't even gotten through half of our agenda. So on the specific question of zoning, which is the vote in front of us, that's one question. The process that got us to here needs some serious help.
Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Campana?
For the zoning, yes.
Commissioner Frazier?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
No.
Commissioner Schlegel?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds?
Yes.
And Mayor Stonehouse?
Yes, motion passes 6-1. That brings us down to item 4, to conduct a public hearing for the rezoning of 135 West Main. And that too will be a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, if you will please read the background.
Thank you, sir. Background, on September 17th, 2019, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing for the proposed rezoning of a parcel of land addressed as 135 West Main Street from a municipal zoning district to central business district zoning. After the presentation of the staff file review and analysis, applicant testimony, and a public hearing, the Planning Commission made the following motion. It was moved by A. Roos, seconded by S. Middlefelt, and carried 6-0, that after conducting a public hearing and review of the application and staff file review analysis for 02 REZ 0919, the Planning Commission finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the Community Master Plan and meets the requirements of the Land Development Code Section 54.1405, and hereby recommends that the City Commission approve 02 REZ 0919 as presented. The City Commission scheduled this public hearing at the September 30th, 2019 regular meeting in accordance with Section 54.1405 of the Land Development Code. A motion to approve this rezoning should state that there was a finding of compliance with LDC Section 54.1405, which is attached to the agenda. If the property is approved for rezoning, the approval shall constitute the adoption of an amendment of the Land Development Code and the official zoning map of the City of Marquette. Fiscal effect, rezoning of the property would provide for the development of the property and an increase in taxable value. Recommendation, following the public hearing, approve the rezoning of land at 135 West Main Street to Central Business District in compliance with LDC Section 54.1405. Alternatives as determined by the Commission.
Public hearing is open.
Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave, here in the city of Marquette. First, where is this property? This is another thing that I have about the number 3 and number 5. Basically, there's no visual maps here of any of this stuff. It's 2020, folks. We need at least a picture of what it's going to be and where it is, if not an actual diorama of it. That's just one of the procedural things on this. Another is apparently just like the rezoning ideas that go on, the master plan is what's always referred to. And I'm sorry, but that sounds fascist. All right, and I completely hate the idea that every time you guys bring up a master plan or community effort, there's a sort of socialism that goes into this whole concept. And I mean this in the sense of you've refused a lot of concerns because this has been going on for 10 years. Because of something has been worked on for so many years. There's so many other people have worked on it, and you're no longer able or willing to listen to maybe a new concern. Personally, I'll go back about the roads. What if we find out that the plume is actually all over the property based on our construction of this new road on Lakeshore Drive? Are we going to rescind any kind of rezoning? So this rezoning about a road or about the 135 Main Street, I'm assuming it's the parking lot across from the Commons. And if that's the case, where do those 100 cars go? Because I've been told, or at least in the last meetings that we had up here when I was listening to this, you were told that there will be public parking underneath. That means at least 3 levels, which in your sense is an 80-foot hole. So if we have 3 levels of parking because 100 spaces need to be refilled at a location that get rezoned, are you as a city getting cash for those parking spots? Or does that cash now, instead of going to the city or the DDA for their parking permit, does that go to this individual company who owns the building now? Because honestly, I've been walking because the Commons parking lot is so full in the morning. I've been walking from the old house or basically from this location and the theater that's there all the way over to 4th Street. So it's basically 2.5 blocks of walking with a slight uphill to get to work from what is going to be filled up even more, the Commons parking lot. So my question on this 135 Main Street roll call vote is, who gets the money for the parking? Is it the city? Do we get a deal out of this? Do they get a higher tax rate? How are you going to recompensate us for not only the parking spots, but then for parking spots after they're gone? Do you have any plan to replace those 100 vital parking spots?
Anyone else to address the commission? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Commissioners, what is your pleasure? Commissioner Campana?
Overdue.
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the rezoning of land at 135 West Main Street to Central Business District in compliance with the LDC Section 54.1405.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Mr. Campana, any further comments?
Couple things. Mr. Ludenberg, we apologize to you if you didn't find maps, but I was looking in our supplement. We got all kinds of maps. Did you go on? None on there, no, but if you go to the website, they're all over the place. Yeah, after this meeting, it's all yours, man. I'm done.
No.
You can have my seat. Okay, second thing, a question about parking places. He says 100 parking places. City manager, can you clarify that? What's going to happen with the parking?
Well, there's two things. One is that there will be a parking structure underneath the building. I'm not sure the number of parking spaces. However, I'm under the understanding there will be enough to accommodate the users of the building plus some of the public. And I believe the last discussion we had was that it may not reach the exact number that's being dispersed or displaced. Secondly, the DDA is continues to actively work on the parking question or problem. There is discussion for a potential new parking deck in the downtown area, which is probably needed or necessary whether this action takes place or not. And lastly, any tax revenue, any benefit from this will go to the DDA because of the TIF district. It's not a revenue necessarily for the city itself. So the parking will go from public to private, and the DDA will be responsible for everything thereafter.
Mayor, excuse me, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mayor, or City Manager. We could just use our names. It would be easier, I think. But that did answer the question about the parking. I did, as someone who has a master's degree in planning, let me just say that the notion of in other states, the term is comprehensive plan. It's just that in the Midwest, mostly it is master plan. But the idea is that it's a holistic, complete, includes everything look at your community. So I just wanted to stand up for my my profession just for a minute, and also say that the DDA is working on a comprehensive master plan for its area, and so that would be a place, and to go to their meetings, which happen early in the morning on a Thursday, I think, would be a place to learn more about that.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Frazier.
It is, but it's over by Joe's Gym area, just in that little parking lot. And supposedly from what they told us when they approached us about the problem, they're going to try and dig down as far as they can, which we've heard our city manager told us make maybe one level, it's about all they can go because there's water problems there. But they're going to try and replace as many parking spots as they can. That's all basically parking spots for people that live in the area or work in the area. Not like people that want to park there or go downtown or anything. Basically, it's just parking for those people. And what they told us be similar to what they did at Seabridge Suites. Dig down, put a parking structure in, go up a couple levels, and then the other thing is the DDA is working on creating another parking structure somewhere in town. They're looking at this because they know, the city doesn't care, but DDA likes parking, obviously, for all the businesses downtown. They're thinking about building another parking ramp somewhere in town. This is another thing where they're working on, okay, we're losing parking spots, so the DDA is looking at possibly another parking ramp somewhere, so look forward to that.
Any other commissioners? Okay. We'll need a motion, I guess, to, no motion? We have a motion on the floor. This is a roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Campana?
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier?
Yep.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlegel?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds?
Yes.
Mayor Stonehouse?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item number 5, which is conduct a public hearing for rezoning of municipal property in the 600 block of East Michigan Street. This to a roll call.
On September 17, 2019, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing for the proposed rezoning of a municipal property that was formerly railroad right-of-way within the 600 block of East Michigan Street from a municipal zoning district to medium-density residential zoning. After the presentation of the staff file review and analysis, applicant testimony, and a public hearing, the Planning Commission made the following motion. It was moved by S. Middlefelt, seconded by A. Roots, and carried 6-0 that after conducting a public hearing and a review of the application and staff file review analysis for 03 REZ 0919, The Planning Commission finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the Community Master Plan and meets the requirements of the Land Development Code, Section 54.1405, and hereby recommends that the City Commission approve 03 REZ 0919 as presented. The City Commission scheduled this public hearing at the September 30th, 2019 regular meeting in accordance with Section 54.1405 of the Land Development Code. A motion to approve this rezoning should state that there was a finding of compliance with LDC Section 54.1405, which is an attachment to the agenda. If the property is approved for rezoning, the approval shall constitute the adoption of amendment to the Land Development Code and the official zoning map of the City of Marquette. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation, following the public hearing, approve the rezoning of land within the 600 block of West Michigan Street to medium-density residential in compliance with LDC Section 54.1405. Alternatives as determined by the Commission.
Public hearing is open.
Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave. Basically, I just feel the need to say this again. Where is this? I'm going to assume this is the Sandy right-of-way that's across the street from the Cedar, or near the, what's that restaurant called? That's run down. Thank you, Coco's. So again, I'm assuming this is where that property is, and if so, great, but if it does change the landing development code as much as it has been, again, please, some sort of visuals or some sort of informational piece for residents to take in. This is an important change. This does change the master plan. This keeps up with some certain elements of stuff, but this is a change, and I'm looking to my city to have more information, not less. I don't want to trust you that it's been online or it's findable in some location. What's the harm of adding it to? And as Mr. Campana said, it's on the actual agenda on the PDF version. Sorry I didn't print it out. But again, it's not up here. That same page could have been printed at 11 by 17, if not poster size, and you guys could easily have a pointed script to say this is 600 West or East Michigan Street, and this is 135 West Main. All these things are the procedural things I'm looking for you, Mr. Mayor, to enforce on us, the city commissions and these city meetings. And this might be temporary, so I hope for the next mayor, please keep this in mind, that we are at the mercy of you. The pictures that come up from TV6 are from this room. So if you don't have a picture of Cliff Stow like you did 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, we're kind of going on our own memory. And no offense, but our memories are not that great. We tend to blend in the best parts and forget about the worst parts. So a lot of the map is not necessarily the reason for the night, but if we don't have a reference to where these streets and where these blocks are, how big are these? You know, like the 600 block of Michigan Street, that's a pretty large block. And the little strip that was just explained isn't really on 600 Michigan Street, is it? It connects to a bike path, or it's a big sandy pit. It's used for parking in the summertime for all these activities that we explain is waterfront necessary tools. Again, all I'm asking for is, where is this place, and what do you plan on doing with it after you sell it or after you rezone it? Is it going to be up for residential? Can we build a house down there? Is somebody who lives on that property line going to be able to expand? Do they have to pay the new taxes? Who is, you know, the rezoning, I guess, all of this went through, great. We should hear more about it.
Anyone else to address the commission? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Madam Clerk, I'm sorry.
A motion.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the rezoning of land within the 600 block of West Michigan Street to medium-density residential in compliance with LDC Section 54.1405.
Second.
Any other commissioners?
Real quick, is this within the 600 block of West Michigan?
This is the east.
I'm sorry.
This is the area that was right-of-way, railroad right-of-way in conjunction with the lighthouse.
Okay.
We are rezoning it and planning on transferring it back to the ownership
Correct.
of the
Okay.
local property owners.
Yeah, as it reads. All right, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any comments?
None.
Any other commissioner comments? Mr. Frazier?
What Mike, city manager, told us is basically because of when they did the lighthouse swap with the Coast Guard and all that stuff, it's basically giving and doing a new park. It's basically giving these people that live in the area more property. Is that what the city's doing? Is they're giving people more property? Is what we're doing. If you Google it, you'll figure out where it is.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Campana, got me doing it now. Commissioner Campana?
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier?
Yep.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlegel?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds?
Yes.
And Mayor Stonehouse?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item number 7, under unfinished business, the ORV trail access. Oh, sorry, I totally missed the consent agenda. Let's revert back to item 6, the consent agenda. This will also be a roll call vote because we do have item 6C in it. Commissioners, what is your pleasure? Commissioner Frazier?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Commissioner Smith?
Second.
Any further comments?
Keep it rolling.
Further comments? Seeing none? All those in favor of?
Nope, roll call.
I'll tell you, it's going to kill me again. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Campana?
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier?
Yep.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlegel?
Yes.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds?
Yes.
And Mayor Stonehouse?
Yes, item passes 7-0. That now brings us down to item number 7, under unfinished business, the ORV trail access. Madam Clerk, if you will please read the background.
Thank you, sir. Background, Trail Riders Enthusiast Alliance of Marquette County team brought the concept of an ORV trailhead within the Heartwood Forest Land, as well as access to a larger UP trail system from within the city limits to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board in 2016. At that time, the concept was tabled until the Parks and Recreation Master Plan revision was completed. During the Parks and Recreation Master Plan revision process, a question was included in the community survey to assess the desire of the public to allow ORVs to pass through the Heartwood. The results were 43% yes and 42% no. At the regular meeting in June 2019, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board voted to recommend the attached trail route as well as an additional ORV access not being recommended by the staff. At the August 5th, 2019 regular meeting, the City Commission requested additional information regarding how the DNR would ensure the users of the designated ORV trail remained on the permitted route. Staff has been working with the DNR and SEMCO on a plan for ORV access through the Heartwood Forest Land property on the westernmost end as presented in the attached map. This trail would be completely separate from silent sport trails and would allow passage through the Marquette area for a UP-wide ORV trail system the DNR is working toward. SEMCO would be installing gates as shown on the map that would prevent ORVs from entering the rest of the property and causing damage to the SEMCO gas line. The DNR would be installing signage indicating motorized use outside of the permitted trail is permitted. Fiscal effect, none with this action. Recommendation, approve the access through the westernmost portion of the Heartwood Forest Land property as specified in the attached map and direct the city attorney to develop the permit. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Okay, we have two people that wanted to comment on this. Tony, I don't see here.
Nope, Tony's.
Oh, there she is. Okay, Tony, please. I know, I want to hold the DNR. I want to do these guys first.
My name is Tony Harry, and I live at 6369 US 41 South, Marquette, Michigan. And I'm president of the Team Riders ATV ORV Club in Marquette County here. And we've been doing the club for many years. I wanted to bring up some of my skills that I've done over the years. I'm also a DNR recreational instructor, so I teach a lot of the youth. That's been my goal since I retired from Marquette Public Schools. I can't talk too good because I'm just getting over Bell palsy. And I'm also on the Michigan Snowmobile Association has changed their name. They're now called MySorva, and team and other ATV ORV clubs throughout the UP have joined with, it's called Michigan Sorva. They're called Michigan Snowmobile ORV Association now. And I work on trails throughout Marquette County, Luce County, and all through the UP. We maintain the trail, which maintaining is, you know, keeping the trails clean, safe for pedestrians and everybody that uses them. We take care of the Champion Republic Trail. We just completed 2 brand new trails this year. One trail is from Gwynn to Arnold, and these trails are all done. They're signed, they're legal, ORV and snowmobile trails. Another trail I just finished recently was from Champion to Michigami. And another thing, working with the clubs, property owners, foresters, you know, landowners, the DNR, DEQ, Marquette County Road Commissions. We're working with all kinds of people throughout the UP. The property owner going towards Michigami, he bought the Mount Shasta. Awesome guy, awesome guy. He led us through his property. Beautiful trail. He even asked me the other day when we got done signing it, if a team would help to brush some area on top of the big hill, and he wanted to open it up with picnic tables for everybody. And it's a beautiful, beautiful view. I also work on trails in Newberry, Michigan. When they had the duck fires up there, I do a lot of volunteer work, and we went up there and volunteered, re-signed Pine Ridge and 2 Hearted Trails. And that's for the, I'm a lifetime member of the Alger Sorva too. And I'm also in a co-chair for the Hiawatha Trail Association, which consists of Schoolcraft County, Alger County, Delta County, and Marquette County. I wanted to get out and learn as much as I could about ORVing, meeting people, sharing trails, and that's what I do. And I do a lot of youth teaching. I even started my own youth teaching class for safety-wise. I include bikes, walkers, horses, what to do when ORVs are on the trail. And I started a lot of my...
I must stop you at
Okay.
this point. But
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lutenberger.
So Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave here in the city of Marquette. I remember when this first came up and there was a question about the design or placement of the trail itself. From the map that I saw, it looks like there's no trailhead in the city of Marquette. It looks like we just have access of a corner of a plot of land for us. So I'm curious why why this route was chosen for this type of agenda role here, as opposed to connecting the snowmobile trail from Mount Marquette Road down the Morgan Falls Creek, whatever road that is, to these trails eventually. I mean, I know there's a lot of concern about crossover and non-motorized versus motorized use, but the Morgan Creek Road is a road. It's an actual dirt road. I'm curious why parking on M553 wouldn't be more profitable for the city of Marquette, wouldn't be more dynamic for the city of Marquette. Right now, it seems when you drive in from the airport that the only thing we do and promote here is non-motorized sports. There's no snowmobile head in anywhere in the city of Marquette. So again, an ORV trail is an activity that we seem to be saying we don't want here. Go ahead, drive through the farthest westernmost part of our city. And I have to recommend, the speaker right before me, has valuable knowledge that you could have tapped into and created a very safe pathway, especially after Semco had gotten through and cleared out most of the terrain. So I understand there's been a lot of discussions. I understand there's been a lot of probably back and forth as to what is and is not appropriate. I'm asking you, the city commissioners, why did you push this ORV trail all the way to the end of Heartwood Forest project and not bring it into the city and connect the city to the trail that goes to Munising or the trail that goes to Harvey? Again, the snowmobile trail coming in from the east goes directly south of the city, and there's no gas station until you get past to Negaunee and Meyer. So again, we are talking about bringing in industry and bringing in commerce, but this is one big industry and one big commerce that I don't see you welcoming. And on the same note, I would love to see Cliffstow, if it can't be turned into a residential area, turned into an ORV tract that we can rent from you. There are other ways the city can make money. It's not from taxes alone. We can pay you fees of, say, $20 a month to ride an ATV on some property that you've already committed is contaminated. Thank you.
We have some representatives from the DNR. Is it something you'd like to talk through?
Sure. Got some visual aids tonight. Hopefully they don't fall over. All right. John assured me this was easy to use.
Give their home, John.
So, my name is Matt Toriano, and some of you, how do we broadcast? Just keep talking. Got it. Okay. My name's Matt Toriano, and I presented at the last meeting in mid to early August regarding the ORV trail route proposal on the Heartwood Forest land in Marquette Township. I have with me Ron Yesny. Ron is the UP Trails Coordinator, so he's responsible for all the trails in the Upper Peninsula. So,
yeah, I came along with Matt tonight. I know he's been working really diligently on some of the specifics along with Scully, Rob Katona. What I might be able to offer the commissioners is maybe as the trail coordinator for the Upper Peninsula, I do work with a lot of communities throughout the Upper Peninsula on motorized and non-motorized trails. We look for ways to partner with organizations such as Tony Harry's organizations and organizations that are looking to promote trails, and we look for partnerships that promote communities, bring people in and out of communities, and that ultimately provide sound recreational opportunities, but also promote economic development. So after Matt's presentation, if there's any questions you might have with regard to what we're doing throughout other locations in the Upper Peninsula, I'd be glad to answer those questions, or how maybe some of these specific trail programs that work in other areas. Worked in the trails program for well over 20 years, and maybe I can help. Thanks.
Great,
Just a reminder to please speak into the microphone. We've got viewers at home watching on YouTube, so they won't be able to hear any of your comments unless you're talking in the microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very sorry about that.
That's okay, thanks.
So at our last meeting, when we presented the background of this, and the clerk did a very good job of summarizing that. I know Commissioner Frazier wasn't here, so perhaps for his benefit and the rest of the commission who might have forgotten, it was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of contentious issues since then for the commission. But this was brought forth by team, Tony Harry's group, which he's the president of, to designate ORV trail between the crossroads and into Negaunee. And this would give us connectivity, if we were able to make that connection, from approximately Michigamme all the way down to Powers with year-round multi-use trail. So there's some real benefits to that. There's benefits to the city of Marquette, and there's benefits to all the surrounding communities in which these trails touch. As Ron pointed out, we look towards the economic development piece of this very heavily. Rural economies are supported by tourism. One of the things we've seen over the last 10 years is the rapid growth of ORVs. We're watching ORV use grow and licensure grow and registration grow for ORVs, and we're watching snowmobile decline. And there's several reasons for that. And some are climate-based, and some are based on practicality. But we're watching the market grow, and the users are demanding more opportunity. In turn, we're providing that. Tony pointed out a couple really good examples of trails that his group has worked to open just in the last year. And these are not insignificant tasks. So it's important to remember also that we're trying to create more recreational opportunity. In addition to supporting communities, we're trying to help people that want to recreate benefit from that recreation and have more opportunities available to them. So the real piece to this, and where it's very important to the city and the city commission, is we're asking for we're asking for permission to designate a trail across city-owned land. And this land was once held by the Heartwood Forest Land Group, sold to the City Commission. It occupies mostly the western edge of the city holding here in Marquette Township. So this would be a partnership with essentially three parts. The Department of Natural Resources, the city as a landowner, and the team riders, which Mr. Harry just spoke about. And the way these programs work is they're grant programs. So once we get designation, or if we were to get designation rather, Mr. Harry would then essentially take ownership of that segment of trail. And it would include signing to make sure that use is directed in the appropriate areas, working towards management of areas where perhaps there could be ORV damage, and addressing that with user dollars that are generated from sticker sales to mitigate those issues. Also engaging in law enforcement should there be a need for law enforcement, and continuing maintenance and the restoration piece. In addition to that, on designated trails, and this is a big topic for many of the private landowners, is what's my liability? How does it work for me? Well, the city of Marquette would be listed as an additionally insured under Tony's Club, which would cover the liability for the city and the use on the lands. I brought several examples here of signs that we would use, maybe not these exact ones, but very similar. Here on my right, your left, is a carcinite post. These carcinite posts go in the ground, and they're nearly impossible to remove. They're hammered down several feet. And you can see there's a sticker here that indicates no wheeled motor vehicles. Also, this sign is the same sign, but larger. And then this is what we would call a confidence marker. And this confidence marker helps the users understand where they are and where they can legally ride. These are important for a couple reasons. One, they allow our law enforcement division, or perhaps the county sheriff, if they're out doing ORV patrols, to have an actionable barrier or sign saying, Ron Yesney was on his four-wheeler and he went by one of these signs, and we caught him and we wrote him a ticket. And when we bring that to the Marquette County Prosecutor's Office, they then have evidence of the sign and Ron in his place where he doesn't belong, and it's very prosecutable. It's very, very easy, or I should say easier anyway. So also, these help to direct traffic. And one of the concerns that the city's had is making sure that ORV traffic goes where it's appropriate and not where it is inappropriate. So that's where our signage piece comes in. We favor signage as education and enforcement, and we typically don't favor barriers. We like to address those as we go on. So there's a few maps in your packet, I believe, and this is the first one. This is an overview. We had initially brought forth two recommendations. There was an option 1 and an option 2. The option 2 is no longer on this map. The option 2 is not palatable to the commission. It was not recommended by city staff. It was not recommended by the New Cayman Trail Network. Option 1, however, was recommended by city staff, recommended by the No Cayman Trail Network, and was essentially tabled by this body for further discussion and information. So the green line, highlighted line, is the affected areas of Section 32 and 31 of the Marquette City ownership. And here's a little closer view, so we can get a look at it. This is all on currently designated snowmobile trail. It's currently being used by ORVs. Snowmobiles, obviously, in the winter. There's quite a bit of traffic out there, and I'll show you some photos here in just a moment. The blue line on the eastern portion of this is the No Cayman Trail Network single-track mountain bike trail. As you can see, there's quite a bit of buffer here. There's, in fact, a creek buffer just north of the snowmobile trail is Morgan Creek, which is a riparian buffer with quite a few conifer trees and terrain which would not allow them to cross. So there's some questions or comments regarding barriers and some of these sites. So in kind of specific site plans, how the DNR would propose to handle things, or how SEMCO would propose to handle things. This is a close look at the trail intersection, the snowmobile trail intersection between Trail 8, which is the green line, and Trail 417, which is the red line. One of the things that was discussed was about a barrier or gate in the area of the trail intersection arrow. So this particular area is not suitable for a barrier for several reasons. The first reason being that that's a large maple stand and it's quite mature. And so due to that forest cover type, a gate would have to be accompanied by a fence that would probably run several hundred feet. And it's not economical. It's not good for forest management. It's not good for a lot of reasons. It's just not a natural pinch point. Okay, so one of the things that SEMCO had recommended in their materials, which are also included in this presentation, are a gate at the possible barrier location arrow. So this is the recommendation of SEMCO, and we can take a quick look here. This is LiDAR imagery, and it may be a little difficult to see. LiDAR is a tool used to measure geography, essentially. And you can see this is a representative of a closer look at the map we just looked at. The barrier location is noted there. You can see just to the south of that, there's very steep drainage, several drainages actually coming off that top. And the area where the trail intersection is all a large flat piece of land. You can see if you look closely, road beds and those sorts of things. So it's very detailed. In that flat topography coupled with the forest cover type indicates that it's probably it's not a good spot for a barrier of any kind. So we would not recommend that. However, as I mentioned, SEMCO has recommended this particular area. And so here's some images. So this is the trail intersection location that was called out in the two maps previous. You can see on the left, there's several ORV tracks there. ORV use is happening. We had a trail counter out for a couple weeks. We averaged about 10 ORVs a day. And the photo on the right is a little closer to that intersection, looking to the north on Trail 417, back towards Morgan Creek. And this is the location of the SEMCO recommended barrier. It's more heavily timbered. There's more conifer trees. On the right-hand side, there's a pretty considerable hill. The left-hand side is the riparian buffer for Morgan Creek. And this is the gas line intersection. SEMCO also has some recommendations for this site as well. And the recommendations are perpendicular gates to this corridor. This intersection was part of the proposed ORV route, and this corridor would be blocked, essentially would be running north-south perpendicular to the gas line via gate. And here are the GEI recommendations. So the site that I just showed you on the gas line are sites 8 and 9 on the west end of that map. And their convention is a little different than mine, so it's not exactly congruent. Site 7 is the trail intersection 7 that was discussed for a gate or a barrier, which the DNR is not recommending. And then site 6 is their recommended barrier on Trail 417. So SEMCO provided this image, GEI provided this image of the barriers they intend to use along the corridors. It would be painted high-vis yellow. So the DNR prefers to handle these types of designations with signage. And so we wanted to make sure that the commission could get a good look at some of the work that we would be doing and the signs we would be applying in this corridor. We don't tend to favor barriers. And the reason is we like to address things and address management issues as they come, rather than potentially create them by putting up a barrier. The city of Marquette is the landowner here. So it is the prerogative of the city to do as they wish with their corridors and their lands, and we've seen that, throughout several different designations in this in this meeting. So the DNR is asking for permissions to operate a multi-use trail along the corridor identified in the in this map, highlighted in green, designated option 1. Do you have anything you want to add, Ron?
Yeah, I do, and I'll use this. I think the thing that I would like to add is that we favor a managed use. So I don't think that, you know, based on my knowledge of the area and history with that trail system and with the advent and the boom in the ORV industry, I don't think that you could just make this go away, or I don't think there's an efficient way to pretend ORVs aren't going to use this trail system. They're using it now. It's a heavily used snowmobile trail in the winter. I think we can manage this corridor very efficiently, and I think we can do it well. And I think by doing so, it'll be a better alternative to what we have now, which is unmanaged use of ORVs in the summertime. So we're just simply asking to manage this system, manage it well, work with our partners. If we have situations where people are getting off trails, if we have problems, that's why we have these types of signs, and we use them. And we have law enforcement. Our law enforcement community gets quite a bit of money in law enforcement grants to enforce ORV trespass. ORV trespass is a stronger trespass case than pedestrian trespass or snowmobile trespass. It's automatically ticketable. The ORV grant program is flush with money. We're looking to manage this use. If we have problem areas, then we'd work with gates, then we could work with signage, and just looking to work with the community and do the right thing here.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Smith.
I just want to say thank you to both of you for coming back with a cohesive plan. That's what we asked for in August, and you've delivered tonight, so I really appreciate it. I know we had some concerns the last time we met, and making sure that things were looked at. I am a little confused because the agenda item we have teed up for us includes the gates. I'm hearing from you that you don't want to include the gates, so
I think I would respond to that in that if the gates were the prerogative of the city, you know, there's options available. But we would typically, with our trails program, we wouldn't gate something unless we knew and we had a trespass problem. We don't, as Matt said, we don't prefer barriers. We put barriers in after a known problem exists.
I just so you know, the way that, depending on how we make a motion, I
Yes.
think the gates are included as part of that motion tonight for us. So I'm hearing something different from what the presentation is saying versus what we've been given. So I just want to be clear about that. And I'm sorry, I probably should just make a motion for discussion at this point. So I'd like to move that we suspend the rules for discussion.
We actually don't have to because, you know,
I'd like to anyway. Just make it formal.
it just complicates things.
I know,
Is
but
there
I'd
a
rather
motion,
just-
do we have a second for the suspending the rules?
Second.
For discussion?
Yeah, that's pretty much my discussion, but I had a feeling we were going to get into some more discussion, so I figured I'd just open it up.
I have, okay, comments?
Yeah. We got to vote on
Comments,
it,
we
sorry.
haven't done the vote yet.
Oh.
All those in favor of suspending the rules?
Yes.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Now,
Okay, city manager, I see that you were trying to chat with Jenna about it while you're sitting there, so the plan that you're asking us to approve includes signage, gate, NTN's on board. That's what I gathered from our agenda review.
That's my understanding as well, and I'll ask John to comment further.
Yeah, so as it's teed up, the NTN is supportive of this. They were supportive originally, and they confirmed that support today. And as far as gates or no gates, at this time, Semco is gating a bunch of things in this area to protect their pipeline, and so if it's the commission's prerogative, they would order the gates and install them with that initiative at that time. So you can have both of those gates as indicated, or neither. It would really be up to you. Though the option was put out there because I think there was a lot of apprehension on the part of the commission toward that access getting further into the property. And so between the three different parties, that option was brought forward. So, and it, you know, as far as paying for it at a different time, I think, you know, the Semco money on the table would probably be a now or never kind of thing. So that's worth noting.
Okay, thanks for that, John, because those were my three concerns when Mr. Toriano came here the first time. I don't have any issue, and I'd be willing to make any kind of motion to that effect with those things that are stated in our agenda supplement.
Further, Commissioner Slagle.
So are you saying that you'd want the barriers the 3 barriers in place?
The barrier that Semco is discussing, it to the least, and
Right.
then signage.
Okay, so that's exactly where I'm headed. Thank you.
Commissioner Frazier.
I think signage is a good idea. You don't need barriers for everything. I mean, even nature, but you could put rocks or logs down or something like that. The only thing is, I have a 4-wheel. I don't use it much, but because I don't know the trail system that well, they have to go with Mr. Gary, learn the trail system. But I know there's a big conflict between bikers and 4-wheelers. Is that, you're going to control, with the signs, like, going to control that whole thing? Because I know, as long as NTN's working with the other thing, we don't, you know, all the bikers come back to us and say, how dare a 4-wheeler go down our trail or something like that, you know?
Yeah, certainly in its current form, that that particular corridor has been open and used by several different types of motorized traffic, including ORVs all the way out to 557. And while the NTN wasn't favorable towards opening that with a designation, they were favorable towards opening this western portion, recognizing that it would not affect them and their wish to make sure that other user groups had ability to recreate. It doesn't seem to be a problem now and hasn't been a problem in the past, at least that I'm aware of. So I don't anticipate that being a big issue. The signs and whatever the city commission chooses to do from a land management perspective with barriers will help. And we have a very active and able law enforcement group that can address these issues. The other kind of important aspect of enforcement and maintenance and management is the relationship that the local club has. And that's why Tony's here. These are the folks that are really on the trails with frequency. So they're the ones that are looking for the enforcement issues, the management issues, the signage issues, and they're correcting them. It's a partnership between the DNR, the clubs, and the landowner, which is in this case the city of Marquette. So as those, or if those were to become issues, I'm very confident we would be able to address them with enforcement and then with having extra eyes in the field, such as Mr. Harry.
Sounds good to me. You guys are doing your great job now. Everybody says DEQ and the states are pushovers. I want to put a trail through land. It's not very easy. I mean, obviously, a lot of permits, and it's not as easy as people think. You know, we're doing with the Cliff-style property. They think, oh, the government's supposed to pushovers. They'll do anything for you. It's not that easy. Just those people know that. I don't deal with DNR. I deal with the fish, and a lot of people with DNR, wild, boating people. But I'm sure it's not that easy just to get permits through the state. I'm sure Mr. Hardy probably can tell you that building a trail system through the woods isn't as easy as just cutting down some trees and throwing some dirt down, I assume. So, good luck, guys.
Commissioner Campana.
I would have to say that I am totally in favor of this plan. All it is, it's a connector plan that's on the west side of the Heartwood, so it doesn't interfere with the trails, the bike trails rather. So they'll be by themselves there. When you look at the fact that a majority of the residents of the city want to have this, that's a good sign. You got the Parks and Rec Board in favor of it. You have NTN, you have the DNR, and we have our staff that's in favor of it. So everybody's in favor of it. I don't know why we would be against it. Plus, once the trail becomes designated, we're getting money from the DNR to maintain that trail. Right now, we're not getting any money. We okay it, it's designated, we get money. So I am in favor of this. I think that the ORV group needs to have this. The question about there will be no gates, or I would like the motion to have no gates, but I believe that's going to be the case. Unless needed. If it comes to the point where we got to have it, then we put in gates. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve access to the westernmost portion of the.
Come out of discussion,
No, we don't.
don't we? No. Okay.
We don't have to come out of discussion, Ron. I can make a motion anytime, can I?
Again,
Okay.
okay.
I move that we approve access to the westernmost portion of the Hartwell Forest property, with that including the Semco gate and the signs as specified on the attached map and presented this evening, and direct the city attorney to develop the permit.
Is there a second? Commissioner Schlegel? Second. Commissioner, or Mayor Pro Tem, further discussion?
None.
Commissioner Schlegel?
Real quick.
Any other commissioner?
Yep, I've got one real quick
Got
thing.
one more. That's
Just
quick.
a lot of good teamwork here between the DNR, the trails, the citizens. This is really a great one to hang the hat on. Good move, guys. Thank you for your hard work.
Any other commissioner?
So are we, I got a question. This is both Semco gates or just the gates at the Semco pipeline? I don't understand what Semco gates mean. Okay. And thank you for cutting to the chase. There we go.
Commissioner Frazier?
I think you guys, I think the city manager and city attorney for a nice little ORV ride down your trails. That's how great they are.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? No. Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item number 8. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Background. In support of a safe Halloween celebration, the City Commission is establishing trick-or-treat hours between 4 and 7 p.m. on Thursday, October 31st. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation, approve the Halloween celebration proclamation. Alternatives as determined by the Commission.
Commissioners, your pleasure. Commissioner Smith.
I move that we approve the Halloween celebration proclamation.
Is there a second? Commissioner Frazier.
Second.
Commissioner Smith.
I just wanted to thank city manager, city staff for bringing this forward. I know it may seem like a small thing, but it's something that, since moving back to Marquette and having a child, never could find the hours for when Halloween trick-or-treating was in the city. Every other community in our area has got posted hours, so now we do too, and our hours are on par with the other communities in our area. Makes it easy for the parents. Thank you.
We join the witching hour. Commissioner Frazier.
I think my parents' street's very busy. I've even seen Mike Angela at the trick-or-treating once in a while, so I think, good job.
Any other commissioners? Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify, but, wait a minute, we don't have to do anything.
No.
This is a roll call.
Halloween cup.
It doesn't
No candy
say
for
that.
you.
No candy for you, Mike.
It's not a resolution, it's a proclamation, Your Honor.
I'll tell you guys, it's a rough night. Okay, here we go. Madam Clerk, please conduct the roll call.
No roll call.
We don't need one.
We're on to 9.
It was just a proclamation.
We're done. We're moving on. Item 9, Lakeview
no,
Arena.
we have to
vote on it.
Oh, my God.
What?
We still have to vote on the
Call the
proclamation.
Vote on it. But we can't do it by roll call.
Just call the question. You
But
can
we
if you
could do
want.
it by a roll
You
call.
could.
I want a roll call.
Do it for one time.
You got it.
All those in favor?
Oh, roll call. Commissioner Campana.
If you're getting your
Commissioner
count of-
Frazier.
Yep.
Commissioner Hill.
Yes.
Commissioner Schlegel.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds.
Yes.
Mayor Stonehouse.
Yes. Proclamation passes 7-0.
Certainly does.
We needed a little levity here, guys. Okay, now we're down to item number 9, which is Lakeview Arena storm drain, the emergency bank stabilization. Madam Clerk, please read the background.
Thank you, sir. During the intense storm on October 16th, 2019, and subsequent storms, the shoreline along Lakeshore Boulevard from Fair Avenue to Pine Street sustained heavy erosion damage from the wave action and the storm surge of Lake Superior. While we have had some issues, we have not experienced this severe erosion along this stretch until this fall. The 2012 orthophoto and GIS shows 20 to 40 feet of tree-covered sand dune with an additional 100-plus feet of beach in most areas. We now have no beach, and the water has eroded 50% of the tree cover. Dune created 2 to 5 foot drops. We also have many downed trees and trees that are unstable due to the erosion at the base of these trees. Staff has placed and will continue to place temporary riprap to slow the erosion in these areas. This is not the only erosion area that is approaching the edge of the road. The Lake Arena storm outlet appears to be most critical. Stabilization of the bank is imperative to avoid further compromising the stormwater outlet and the bridge infrastructure valued at over $400,000. Proposals were sought from local contractors deemed capable of performing the work. The recommended work will be performed by Smith Construction for $11,000. The bank repair includes using large boulders and heavy riprap to protect the bridge infrastructure by stabilizing the bank and armoring it for future storms. Fiscal effect: sufficient funds will be made available through a budget adjustment to cover the emergency work from the storm damage once it has been totaled. Recommendation: approve the expenditure to Smith Construction of Marquette in the amount of $11,000 with a contingency of 15% for a total of $12,650. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Mr. Manager, you have some additional information.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. After this agenda item had been approved last Friday and published, the staff met again with Smith Construction, and they proposed and extended the $110 per foot cost to us if we wish to consider stabilizing additional linear footage along the shoreline. I sent out an email earlier today, and I apologize for the lateness of it, but we again met this morning with staff, and we would suggest to the commission if they'd like to discuss or consider extending the work that we are proposing along that shoreline. The minimum we would recommend is the stabilization of the stormwater outlet, which is in this action. However, we're also suggesting that additional work should be considered 400 feet south towards the log cabin that's on the shoreline there, and 400 feet north, which would extend this work out to about $100,000 in expenses. Further, if we want to extend it even further to the north, to where the beach begins near Pine Street, would add an additional 500 feet. Where's Scott? 500 feet, bringing the total up to $154,000. And I'm going to ask Scott to step up to the podium and explain the background behind this.
I think a lot of it was covered in the supplement, but really it was quite alarming, the latest round of fall storms that we had there, which I didn't think were honestly all that bad, but they certainly finished off what was left of the beach in that stretch, and really started eating into the sand dune. And I don't know if the city manager was able to share some of the pictures, but there's one spot where guy is standing at the water's edge and the dune is actually over his head. I'm not sure how tall he is, but I'm guessing there's some areas that are close to 6 feet. The area where the bridge is at, when we originally looked at this, that was thought to be the most critical, and for the amount of $11,000 seemed like a simple decision to make that proposal to the commission to, at a minimum, do that much work to protect that infrastructure investment. The road itself, if you were to reconstruct a road with no curbing such as that one, is going to run about $130 a foot, and that's if it's in the same place that it is, so you don't have to do any additional tree clearing or anything like that. So at $110 a foot, you know, you are approaching the cost of what you're protecting. With the storms that we generally see in the fall, we see a lot more of the onshore waves coming in, a lot of the eastern or northeastern winds, and they're coming right at that shoreline. Unlike the shoreline on the north side of the Picnic Rocks Park area there, and unlike the shoreline further north between Wright Street and Holly Street, which is a section we're normally talking about, there is no rock or any other, you know, type of material like that protecting this. This is mainly all sand that's left. We will continue, you know, certainly depending on your action tonight, to you know, keep placing riprap in areas where it's approaching the road. We did have 3 areas, I think, where the waves had cut into that bank, so it was roughly, you know, 10 feet from the edge of the road. So I mean, assuming the long-term plan is to have that road in place, we're recommending that we try to armor it the best we can. As the city manager mentioned, you know, going 400 feet to the south, that'll tie into the armoring that the one house at the end of Fair had done. And then going 400 feet north, that'll catch the worst area. But certainly, you know, if you're willing to, I would look at doing the whole thing, simply because, you know, if we look at the amount of erosion that was done in just a couple of storms this fall, that's all you have is sand going to the north until you hit the rock, which is, you know, halfway between Pine Street and Wright Street.
So our, our recommendation is to actually go beyond this 12,000 or 11,000 for the outlet to a minimum of 400 feet north and south, and to do it ideally to extend that to a total of 1,400 feet to where it ties in with the beach. I'd like to point out that the rock we're proposing is significantly larger than anything we've placed anywhere else along the shoreline. We anticipate a minimum of 3-foot in diameter boulders to stabilize the shoreline. We would consider this temporary in that we would like to do a better job if we can come up with some grant funding through the Army Corps of Engineers. However, we feel that this type of armoring will be sufficient to keep that shoreline intact for some time to come. With the financing, we have not budgeted for this. However, I am assured that from Gary that we can, by year's end, we can make the necessary budget adjustments to include this in the current budget, utilizing funds that are not spent over the course of the fiscal year. However, worst case scenario would require a budget adjustment at the end of this fiscal year where we might have to go into the savings account, but we would not shoot for that as our goal.
Commissioners, your pleasure.
Oh, Matt.
My apologies, Mr. Lutenberger. You have the floor.
Thank you. Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave, here in the city of Marquette. I actually walked down that property during the sunny afternoon, Sunday afternoon. Was able to see firsthand that where the road is and where the water is literally below our feet and above our head. There are points not too far in that easily get to 8 feet as a drop. And if you want, not if you want, but I'm going to be putting up my Facebook pictures tomorrow, so feel free to look up the photos. But it's about a 9-foot drop on average all the way across the board. Standing there during one of the early storms when the road was still open, I was able to watch this storm sewer actually carve away the sand that I was standing on. When I first got to the trickle going out to Lake Superior, it was probably no wider than this podium where you could hop and have no problem. But if I was on this side and 3 minutes later had to get to this side, I would have been succumbed to a huge water flow. So there's a lot of storm runoff in this area. There's also now, which we just found out, a big water line difference. That I think is the biggest thing. It's not necessarily that we've got a raise in water table. It's that we don't have a beach. And I mean that in both the recreational side of things and the environmentally engineering side of things. So if you are going to replace this road, consider that we just lost a ton of beach land property. This is affectionately known as Dog Beach or NMU Beach. So I don't know how much actually are going to be our funds as opposed to what NMU owns on this property, which again, that's a city thing. But if we're going to drop a bunch of millions of dollars for reconstruction of a barrier, of a sand barrier, I question whether or not we are actually making any improvements, or are we doing anything with a further incentive other than the next 5 days we need to fill in all of this sand that might be falling apart. I bring this up because the road you're rearranging a little further north on the Cliffstyle property, which is protected by rocks, which is getting bumped out by these waves and these storms, you are telling us that this Lake Superior shoreline is not stable. And I don't see a plan for you to make a road go from Lakeview Arena all the way out to Presque Isle any different than what you have now. And if it is different, it's basically putting up a big barrier of rocks. So we no longer can walk on the Lake Superior shoreline in the city of Marquette. I would like you to tell me, where can we go on the city other than that new development at Clark's Landing? Where can we go in the city on the city of Marquette besides here? So please consider fixing the beach as part of this.
I don't believe there was anyone else that had asked for time. That said, commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? None. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, couple questions that I've got here. Are any of these, I understand the placement and the size of the stone. Do we know that if we put this stuff in place, I mean, what are the chances of it being there in the spring, or at least up until we get enough ice shoves to block things up? Is this something that one of our surveyors or hydro engineer or somebody like that can tell us if we engineered placement of these, what are the chances they're going to stick around?
I can let Scott answer that, but just to start, the answer is that we have done this at the Carp River 2 years ago as well, the same type of work to shore up that area when that got washed away, and it's been there pretty stable, but Scott can go on.
Yeah, it pretty much sums it up. Really what we're looking at is about 8 foot of rock vertical with probably 2 feet below the surface where it is now. So they'll be towed in, and we will have filter fabric in that to keep the fines from washing through the rocks. This is a general practice that the contractor has been using along Lake Superior shoreline for quite a while now with success.
So you're putting fabric, you're not just dropping rocks, you're putting fabric.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
that's really important, isn't it?
And there is a multi-sizing of rock to kind of fill in and take up as much of the void as we can.
Yeah, and I know that Smith's doing this, or proposed it.
Yep.
So they also did that stretch from Sunset Point up to where that stops at Presque Isle.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
that's another good reference of durability and strategic placement, I guess.
Yep.
And the need for multiple sizes in the fabric. So, okay. Hit 'em. What do you got? Anybody else?
Mayor Pro Tem.
I might have missed this, Scott. I apologize. We're talking about doing this for this year, and that's why we're talking about doing this evening.
Correct.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
I
if
have
it-
a comment, but it's not for Scott necessarily.
If it wasn't for the amount of damage that we saw just from those couple of days of storm there, you know, we probably wouldn't be standing here, but it's happened very quickly towards the end here to, you know.
City manager, when you sent that email out today, it was a little confusing with numbers, and I think I understand 154,000 is the final number? 'Cause for all of
Yes.
it? Okay.
For all of it, 154, about 100 for 400 and 400,
Okay.
and 12 for just the outlet.
Okay, and the last thing, I often enough have a difficult time when we get something such like notice to vote on it and to make that decision, especially when we're talking about this much more money. But I also fear if we don't do that now and we don't do it before the next meeting and we have a new commission come on and then we're talking December, I'd fear what would happen in that time period. So I'd be willing to go forward with this for that reason.
Commissioner Smith.
I also struggle with getting the information at 1:55 p.m. I work a full-time job, so I'm not able to check my commission email during the day. Couldn't look at it until tonight, so that part is difficult for me. I understand the time constraints. I understand it's an emergency. I'm not going to be able to support this tonight. I'm sorry. But I would be in support of having an emergency work session where we discuss it so that we can have something on the agenda for the November 12th meeting. I need more information. I need a presentation. I need time to look at pictures and walk the site and think about long-term and short-term goals for that whole corridor instead of just an email sent 2 hours before a meeting. 4 hours, whatever it is, but I only had 2 hours to be able to look at it. So, yeah.
Other commission comment, Commissioner Hill.
So I first noticed this on December 4th, 2018, in terms of, and I was partially right, partially wrong. I've been very concerned about that culvert since the storm we had on December 2nd, I believe it was, 2018, which completely filled in that culvert and meant that the water was backing up behind Lakeview Arena. I actually was sort of part of a project to change what happened back there behind Lakeview Arena with Superior Watershed Partnership when I worked there years ago. And so it kind of shows that things on the lake are more complicated than we think. I was really worried that we were going to flood out Lakeview Arena. Didn't think about the fact, because that sand just seemed to be there and didn't seem to be going anywhere. So do we have any sense of where all that sand went? That sand's still there somewhere. It's where do we know?
As far as where it went in the lake?
Yeah, because on an ocean, you know, the sand is creating barrier islands in one place and taking it away from another place. That's Florida versus the Georgia, basically. Do we know where the sand went? Do you have any?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know it's in the lake.
Yeah.
Let me just add to that, if you don't mind. The previous information that we've had related to our lakeshore discussion, the other part we're working on is that the sand is being pushed up towards the mouth of the Dead River and actually extending the beach there. There's a counterclockwise rotation that comes between the picnic rocks and the shoreline that pushes everything north more than anything else. It's definitely not coming inland. It's going north for all we can tell.
Thank you. That's helpful. So, and that to my, so I sent emails. I didn't say this publicly back then, but I had sent emails to the entire commission, to the city staff, saying, I'm really worried about this. What's going to happen? And you know, I can, again, I didn't have time either. I work as well and didn't have a chance to look at these things. But basically, I'm just saying this area looked like it was going to be a problem. It's turned out to be a much bigger problem than we thought. We're looking at this emergency resolution. I don't feel comfortable spending $154,000. But on the other hand, you can also see the road's going to go. The road is going to go. And and we can throw a bunch of rock on it. And you made a good point. We're not going to have any beach left. We're just going to be surrounded by rock. And I think we need to think hard about that as a community as we are dealing with climate change. So I'm not going to be able to support this. But let's have a better conversation. I trust that you guys know a lot about how to address things, but I think we need to be asking some bigger questions.
Commissioner Frazier.
I agree, get it done. I mean, you get a contractor, excuse me, a contractor that's got the time, willing to do it. Just try and put some rock down, put any kind of barrier down there to stop the erosion, because we know the lake's up at its highest point right now. It's going to go down a little bit during the winter, but it'll be back up again by next fall. It's going to be way up again. So we all know the lake's not going anywhere, and sand doesn't disappear, just gets pushed around. I know it used to be about probably 6 feet of beach at my parents' boathouse, and now it's probably a foot of water there, so it just disappears. Remember McCarty's Cove, back by the lighthouse, used to go out and play on the rocks all the time when I was a kid. Now you can basically, the rocks almost underwater. So the lake's going up, it's not going. I think it's a good solution just to get it safely, put rocks in, do anything to save the road for now, and then we can create more beach once the road gets moved. And everything gets done, they're going to create more beach along that lake shore. When they do the dunes, and it'd be better. We've got a little beach. We got, the new beach out by the island. We got South Beach, McCarty's Cove. There's plenty of beach, but, sometimes some of the beach is actually disappearing, not because it's just going underwater. I mean, to the point where now, I was down at McCarty's Cove before, and the water's touching the lifeguard station, so firemen have to learn how to swim, but I think it's a good idea and get it done.
Commissioner Campana.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is my belief that we should probably have started reinforcing this yesterday. I mean, I've taken a couple trips. I walked down to the area where the wave action has hit the road a couple times, and literally the road is about 2 to 3 to 4 feet away from the water at this point. I mean, and it was, like you say, not even a big storm. And we're looking at November when you get the big storms. If we get a storm tomorrow, it could take out that road. Bridge too, but the road. And then you don't have the road. What do you do? So, I'm in favor. I think the faster we get going on reinforcing this road, the shoreline, the better it is for the city, for the residents. Thank you.
Other commissioners, comments? Commissioner Schlegel.
Sorry, I had to let everybody else go through. Trying to think of the old environmental science professor at Northern. Who knows him?
Hughes.
Woodcock professional. He was the master at the Woodcocks. Robinson. Walk the beach with Dr. Robinson. And that's where I learned about, if I'm using the term properly, beach cessation. It's the term that they used for how the sand goes from one end of the shoreline of our great city to the one out by the Upper Harbor, and it makes a lot of sense. I think what we're dealing with here is obviously our high water levels, and I'm not going to try and overspeak I'm not an engineer, but higher water levels obviously, and that wind wasn't a normal surf for our late season storms. I truly believe that if you follow that portion of the environmental science, how that whole thing's going to work, if you put stone there right now at some point in time, and it's not going to be that long, you will actually see sand catch itself on the other side of that stone, and it'll then eventually work its way back to building a beach on the other side of that stone. It happens frequently. If you get out towards go up 550 and you see along the beaches there, routinely those beaches get beat up, and all of a sudden another current comes through, another weather event, and the wind or the sand finds itself back over on those beaches. I can't guarantee that happening. I'm hoping it's going to, but plain and simple, when it comes down to the money that you're asking for here, I wouldn't even consider putting $11,000 at anything if you're not going to at least do the $100,000 pitch. And I don't know what kind of a timeline that we're on for getting that much 800 feet of shoreline. Was it 400, 500? 444 or 445?
Well, it's 1,400 total,
Okay.
if you're looking at the entire amount.
Okay, so, anyway, if there's a way for us to start working on this at the 100,000 level and have some sort of an emergency get together and talk about the potential for adding another 54 on there. If we don't, we're gonna lose the bridge, we're gonna lose the road, and we may as well just shut her down until, who knows? Why bring it back? I mean, you're gonna have to put something out there to keep it from going up to Lakeview. That's my take on it. So I would encourage us to, at very minimum right now, to heavily consider the 100,000, if not the whole thing. But it's called emergency and for a reason, and we gotta make a decision, and it's gotta be now.
Commissioners, further comments? Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to move that we approve the expenditure of Smith Construction of Marquette in the amount of $154,000.
Is there a second? Commissioner Frazier.
Second.
Further comments, Pro Tem?
No.
Commissioner Frazier?
Get the rock done. Save the road.
Any other commissioners? Okay, ready for the vote? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
By those opposed, by no.
No.
I think I hear 2 noes, so that we are at 5-2 majority then. Motion passes 5-2, restated. That brings us to item 10, which is the commission representative to Northern and related. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just brought this up, and I'm just going to simply make a motion that I think I'm going to move that the mayor appoint somebody from the city commission as a representative to the Northern board regarding Indigenous people.
Is there a second? Second. Commissioner Hill, Mayor Pro Tem, any further comments?
None.
Commissioner Hill?
Nope, great idea.
Let me make one then. The last meeting, we made a very good, I think, pitch, if you will, that we need to work closer with the university on the Indigenous Peoples' Day, with those things that we can do together and do better. And one of the ways, the keys to making that happen is having representation with them as they go through their planning process. So this was really the outflow of that. My intention would be to name Commissioner Smith to that role, to represent the commission with any planning activities with the university. That said, we have not received an official invite from the university yet, so the city is leaning forward in expectation of that. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed by no? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. That brings us to the second public comment period. I remind folks not to exceed 3 minutes per person. State your name, physical address, and making public comments.
James Gallup, 538 Yalmer Road, Scandia. And first, I'd like to thank you folks for approving the Dow Cliffs zoning deal there, because it really is your only option. It's your only option, and you know, got a lot of smart folks on it, right? And they might have some remedial things, right? And everything goes. But then again, if it don't work out, it just plain don't work out. Then you still got the problem. And all we could really hope for is that Viridia Group does not get approval for residential properties there, because they can never make it happen, and then they would still own it. So it'd be good. But second of all, I'd like to say I do hope that you all have clearly felt the downside of not following the rules consistently. And I noticed a couple of you did suspend the rules. So you did admit that there is a rule, that there is to be no discussion or vote or debate before there's a motion made. And it appeared to create significant confusion and anxiety. You had a couple of members that said, we don't have to suspend to the rule, but that just means it's a breach. The same breach he's always done is if you got to actually motion to suspend it, you got to suspend a rule to do it. You do it. And so my question is, what rule exactly is that you suspended? Where's the rule? I didn't find the rule in your rules. And a simple point of order they'd have to read the rule. They'd have to find the rule and read it. And there's 2 things that you cannot suspend. Under Robert's Rules of Order, we're still saying that you will. Your rule is that you will follow Robert's rules. You will do it. Okay. But Robert's rule says that there's 2 things you cannot suspend: the bylaws and fundamental principles of parliamentary law. You can't suspend those. And that's one of them. It's the motion first. So you know what you're going to vote on. You know what you're talking about. Now, you waited to the end. You did that twice. And then you got to the end. You said, any more discussion? No, we already had it. Good, vote. So what benefit was it to motion to suspend those rules? You really had no benefit. You did all the same discussion, and you just all voted the same. And it is the duty of the presiding officer, when the agenda item comes up, to the first thing is to entertain a motion to approve the next item as written. And then you can get into, which I've noticed, now I understand why you do this. You then go back and say, you don't do the motion, you get a bunch of discussion, and then you read the motion. Everybody's got it in front of you, right? You read the motion with the amendment in it. Instead of saying, motion to approve, like you're supposed to, motion to approve, and if you don't, just vote it down. If you don't want it, vote it down. Motion to approve, and you say, well, I'd like to amend some language. They like to make a little amendment and say, not the 140,000, or make it 100,000. You'd like to make it with the gates, not the gates. This is the way it's supposed to be. Please instruct your parliamentarian and your legal counsel to do the orientation for parliamentary procedure right here in front of God and everybody and your constituents, so they all understand. And a simple point of order. Another thing is, if you have, and the other rule is that the clerk is the one in the rules. Well, wait a minute. There's a rule. There's a rule.
Sit down. Sit down.
Okay, but there's a rule. Point of order, please. Point of order, please.
Quite literally.
Quite literally. Point of order.
Sit down.
Anyone anyone desiring to address the commission, please do so. Tony Harry, 6369 Marquette, Michigan. I just want to say one thing. It's hard to meet somebody in 3 minutes. If team riders can help anybody with anything, I mean, meet at meetings, anything, I'm willing to do that. I know a lot of stuff. I've been throughout the whole UP, born and raised in the copper country. I know trails all over the place. If I can help with anything, I'd like to. Another trail that Team Riders maintains is the Iron Ore Heritage Trail, contracted out to Team. We maintain the trail from the Nagani Ice Arena to Republic. And then plus we take care of another trail in Newberry, Michigan. It's called the Silver Creek Trail. And then through Algersorva, I'm a lifetime member of Algersorva in Munising. And besides doing the ATV program, I also groom snowmobile trails in the winter in Marquette County and Alger County. And then we also maintain this Pine Ridge and Two Hearted Trails in Newberry. If I can help with anything, let me know. Last year we did a handicap ride for the blind, the youth, and they came from all over the place, New York, Grand Rapids. Midway Rentals was awesome. They gave us a free couple side-by-sides to help with this handicap ride, and the kids had a ball. I had a young lady sitting next to me all the way. We started from up towards the Buckhorn, a little campground up there where they were staying, and we took them all the way to Autrain Lake, let them touch the water. We went to the Little Scott Falls on 28, let them feel the falls. These kids were awesome, and they wanted to do it again. And that's what I like to do. One of these days, I'm hoping if we can get more trails, or more access in Marquette County in different areas. I'd like to do a senior citizens ride like they do in Noggin for my trail, and a veterans ride together, somehow, because I am also a veteran. But that's all I have to say. If I can help with anything, let me know. Thank you.
Colleen Roberts, 903 Adams Street. First of all, Commissioner Hill, thank you for your vote. I think you understood what a lot of us were trying to say here. The other thing is, in 1969, there was a commission and there was a mayor, and they bought property for $1. I don't think anybody here is blaming them for how much it's going to cost to clean that place up. They had no clue because none of the laws were involved that we have now. Okay, so for those families or those people that are still alive there, I don't think the citizens of Marquette have anything against what was done then. The other thing is on the master plan. When I was in high school, I had a master plan. I was going to be a lab tech. And by the time I went into college, it was going to be speech therapy. Then it flipped over to history, then it flipped over to English, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. those things change, you know, as you go on in life, or you see different things. Your master plan for yourself and for your community change. So I just like you to keep that in mind too. Just because something was written down 20 years ago doesn't mean it's solid today. I think a lot of the people that talked tonight were speaking about the residential zoning. I don't think they were talking about Marquette not getting tax money, or Marquette not building something or providing a business or something on the Cliffdown property. I think they're concerned about their neighbors and the property and the residential, the growing the garden in the backyard or taking an apple off a tree or whatever. I think that is the main concern of most all the people that spoke here tonight. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for honestly thinking it over. Don't just rush into anything, okay? Just think it over. Residential is a lot different than a mall or a restaurant or someplace where you come and go, you know, spend an hour and leave. Okay, people are living there. Obviously, it's already voted on, but I think you have to realize that the people, the citizens, are concerned about their families and other citizens. And I'm sure in your hearts you are too. Okay, thank you.
Matt Lundberger, 1406 Garfield Ave here in the city of Marquette. Thanks for listening to me. I don't get a chance. I don't send emails. I don't have your phone numbers. I don't try to contact you while we're out having restaurant meals or anything or walking down the street. So this is the only time I get to speak. And in 3 minutes, I tend not to be able to put all the pieces together. But I wanted to say about this last comment, number 9, the storm drain. I want you to pay for the storm drain replacement, but I want you to also put in place something, anything, going forward that says this is not you, the commissioner's decision about how to protect the lakeshore. As the lady just pointed out, speaker in front of me pointed out, in 1969, the mayor and the commission voted on buying contaminated property. This is something that I wish back then was created as a conference. And I'm hesitant to really say this because I know this isn't the cause, but Mr. Frazier, I know you were in an accident and you have a certain cognitive abilities that are not the same as they were before the accident. I wanted to point out, though, your slurring of your words and your cognitive...
Point of order.
The point of order, please.
Come on, that's you're not qualified.
You can do better than that.
That is very similar to the chemical analysis of pine tar and what they have found around grade schools in the similar divisions.
Mr. Lutenberg.
PFAS is also a chemical that is...
Just a second.
Is it? Okay, okay, I'll leave. I'm sorry.
I got no proof.
I'm sorry, really? You didn't answer your point of order.
You can follow him if you like, Mr. Dow. Anyone willing to address the commission, please do so.
Good evening. Margaret Brum, 404 East Magnetic Street, Marquette, Michigan. It's been a long night for all of us. I'll end where I began, which is at any point in time, if anybody on the commission, anybody with the city, anybody who's remotely interested in the history of the Cliffsdale site is interested, get in touch with me. I'll be happy to run you through my presentation. If you don't feel like you want to do it in person, it's on YouTube. The modern history of the Cliffsdale site starts at about 1 hour and 13 minutes in. If you don't want to go through the long-term history, the modern history starts at 1 hour and 13 minutes in.
Consider that we just lost...
I'm sorry. Anyway, I got distracted for just a second. My apologies. I don't mean to be distracted. I regret to report to the commission that during my research in the last 3 months, I have been unable to find any wood chemical facility that has been remediated to be productive land in the way that you're intending to do so. I'm not exaggerating on that, sir. I have looked, and I have looked carefully. I know what I'm looking for. My looking has included sites in England that practice this type of technology. So in the event you're successful in remediating the Cliffstow site, you'll be making history, not just for Marquette, but for the entire chemical industry. You have land with multiple tar pools on it, and that's a direct quote from your Trimedia Engineering Service. That's not something I'm making up. You have a daunting, daunting task to bring it. And for the record, the commission in 96, 97 has their own slide in my presentation. This commission will also have their own slide in my presentation. This decision on zoning did not have to be made tonight. There was absolutely no reason presented that it could not have been postponed for further consideration. Nevertheless, we go forward. I stand ready to be of assistance to the next commission, the next people who are working on this. Keeping in mind, the 96, 97 commission bought land for $1 and thought they were getting a deal. There has never been any good news coming out of the Cliffstow site. In 2011, wood tar oozed out of the ground behind the pine apartments on Presque Isle. And if you want to go through the newspaper headings there, they're quite horrible. So good luck with your decision making. You've made the decision, you own the decision. Commissioner Hill, I respect your analysis. I really do think you understand it's more complicated than we must go forward. Nevertheless, I wish you the best. This is the last night for this commission. I've watched you for a year. You will be remembered for many decisions you made. The Cliffstow decision will be one of them. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Anyone to address the commission?
Frank Giaverto, these are my opinions. Our weed ordinance barely passed, however, this board was remiss by not discussing whether the 500-foot rule would geographically limit the number of shops, perhaps below demand. They didn't scrutinize the maps. My comment and those of a realtor were ignored. The realtor described the very problem I just explained as it affects him in the real world. Please let us be heard. Ms. Reynolds' parting is bittersweet. She was above average in public orientation and ended up participating reasonably. Whatever she accused me of saying remains a mystery, but I'll try not to judge my impression of her by only a few remarks over the course of years. Following the October 15th library presentation, Mr. Fraser kiddingly said, "Our library would be better if a certain type of punch was available." We can only assume he referred to alcohol. He was the only soul who thought it was funny. No one laughed. He acted incognizant of the problems across town and at our library. There's already too much alcohol and needles. He also compared the addictiveness of alcohol to weed. Most people can smoke weed daily for months and quit cold turkey, no hint of withdrawal. Some may think, oh, how great it might be to take a puff, but do fine without, while others quit for good. A headache from lack of coffee is worse. We've had a pharmacist on board for 6 years whose input didn't fit my understanding of marijuana, and who knows about his steadfast opinions on fluoride.
Okay.
I'm no fluoride expert, but wouldn't trust one word.
I have a comment, but it's
Well,
not
he's the
for
best
Scott.
pharmacist many of us ever had. His expertise didn't translate well to this board. I feel so disappointed and betrayed, and believe whoever takes that seat will serve us better. Mr. Fraser repeated of me again, quote, "He loves to rip on everybody, every commissioner, manager, mayor we've ever had. He writes his speeches before he comes in and reads them off like an actor," end quote. Thank you. I'll make sure it doesn't go to my head. These comments are written in advance so all the information gets conveyed on record in the allotted time. Twice now, Mr. Fraser has told the public what I love. I don't love any aspect of addressing this board. My true love is for the beauty of Marquette and the non-exploitive people among us. Mr. Fraser keeps making blanket statements against me to divert public attention away from specific allegations against other members and him, like that foolish remark about punch at our library. He and I share a huge commonality in that we both make this board look foolish. When he says everybody, it makes me wonder what people think of him.
Mr. Verito, that was a very unkind comment, and I believe it is beneath you to have said that.
I don't know what comment you referred to.
The
and
one
my
you just
time
said.
is going.
Our rules require you to be decorous when you address this commission. Please do so.
Okay, when he says everybody, it makes me wonder what people think about him. Was that it? If you'd prefer to keep.
Your time is up. Thank
Mr.
you.
Verrill, you're using your 3 minutes to
Please, that's it.
go after everybody.
That's it.
so it's-
Point of order.
That's it.
Point of order. It isn't point of order. Time's up.
Anyone else to address the commission? If not, public comments are closed. Comments from the commission, Commissioner Smith?
I have three, and I'm going to probably steal everyone's thunder here because I bet everyone will have similar comments. I wanted to thank Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds and Commissioner Campana for 6 great years of service. You will be missed. Thank you for all you've done for Marquette. I really do appreciate it, and you will be missed. That being said, this is their last full meeting. I believe they will show up for the beginning of the next meeting until we've got 2 new commissioners. So we do have an election coming up on Tuesday, November 5th. Please vote if you haven't already. Like I said, we've got 2 new commissioners, and the BLP has a seat up as well. Our next meeting is on a Tuesday evening, November 12th at 7 p.m. So that's 2 kind of differences from our normal. Just pay attention to that. It's on a Tuesday, not a Monday. It's at 7, not at 6. We have to do that per city charter, and because of the timing, the 7 o'clock is a timing thing because it's our organizational meeting, and it's on Tuesday because of Veterans Day on Monday, the 11th. Thank you.
Mr. Schlegel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second the accolades. Commissioner Reynolds, Commissioner Campana. It's been a 2-year, about almost a 2-year stint for me after coming in. Unfortunately, after Commissioner Baldini's passing, and I want you to know how much I appreciate the work that you've given to the City of Marquette. I watched it very closely my many years at the Planning Commission, and I want you to know that just because people aren't here in person, that they don't see you and appreciate the work that you guys have put in. I just can't say it enough, and I wish you both the best of luck in the future. On a serious note about last meeting, I want people to know that the vote that we took for the marijuana regulations, recreational wise, all the commissioners were for the motion of legalized marijuana in the city of Marquette. And social media has come to say that there's 3 versus 4 or 4 versus 3 in whatever direction that they want to go. And I think it's important to realize that it was only a matter of some of the locations and restrictions and maybe some overlay that separated the opinions that we all had in common. And for some people to say that one commissioner was not for it because they didn't vote in line with the overlays that were put in place, and they were not for the legalization, I think is something that is completely wrong, and I wanted everybody to be aware that
The commission.
we were all for what the voters voted for. With that being said, I'll pass it on.
We really knew how to make my last meeting really fun. that was something, guys. I'm not going to take up much time. The only 2 things I'm going to say is about my time here. I've always said this is the second most rewarding thing I've ever done. First is having a child. But you get to learn a lot of things that you wouldn't have learned. You get to meet a lot of people you wouldn't have met. You make friends that you never thought you would have had. And I'm thankful to the commissioners that I've served with over my time. And I look forward to what Marquette does in the future. And to Mr. Lutenberger's point, it's 2 years before I can serve on a board. However, now my husband can serve on a board, which I'm sure he'll be interested in because he hasn't been able to. So with that, I just want to say thanks.
Commissioner Campana.
Go over, Dave.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, a reminder, Veterans Day is November 11th. It's a time to honor our veterans for their service, and especially those who are on active duty at this time. In regards, I would like to do some backing for our mayor and the commission as far as Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is a format. We don't necessarily have to follow it. It's a format. Every municipality tweaks it. It's one size does not fit all. You cannot tell me that every municipality in this country follows the book. So, eat on that, okay? Yes, this is my last meeting. I'd just like to thank the residents of Marquette for allowing me to do this for the last 6 years. All I wanted to do is just, represent the people and try to make Marquette a better place. Along the way, I've met a lot of very great people. I've had the opportunity to learn how this city operates, and it's been a real educational learning experience. I have come to know many of the city employees, and I got to tell you, these employees really work hard for the city. They care about the city, and they should be more appreciated than they are. Again, it's been a great experience for me, and I thank all the residents for allowing me to do this. Thank you.
We're going to miss you, Dave, Mrs. Sarah. You feel lonely at the head of the table without you, Dave. You always been great for everything, and, great mayor. Then Baldini took over. Then Baldini passed away. You took over Baldini, and Baldini passed away. So you've been great. We miss you very much. And the city's developing land just that they own just because they've been for sale for a long time. And we'd love to see somebody develop the old Shopko, Office Max, Marquette Mall, but those are not deemed profitable. I mean, otherwise a company move in and swap them up, no problem, because as our financial officer, Gary, could tell you, Marquette Mall has been on the bottom end of the taxes for a long time. They've not been paying their taxes. Same with Shopko. They were on the tax loophole thing, and so is We Energy. We Energy paid a lot of taxes, but they were also on we had to fight with them every year to try and get them to pay taxes. So if we look, I've heard maybe Fleet Farm come into Shopko area. I've heard all kinds of things. Who knows? But someday, somewhere, we'll put it. But the thing is, malls are dying everywhere but down south, bigger areas like Wisconsin. Everybody wants to be like Walmart. Park in front of the store and walk in. And if you walk the same distance, through Walmart as you would through the Western Mall, but that's where, people own a jewelry store. They moved out of the mall because they said, okay, people want to park in front of the store and walk in. That's what people want to do. So it's whatever people want to do. And I can take the punishment by people talking bad about me, whatever they want to talk their thing. And Rich Virtual has been complaining about everybody for longer, and I've been involved in the city commission. Every former mayor has been talked about. He even threatened one of our mayors in the bathroom one time. And we've told Mr. Virtual before, if he wants to be involved in the city, step up, run for commission, see if everybody likes you, and then you get a chance to vote. But as Mr. Slagle said, it's 4-3 vote. That's why there are 7 commissioners. So
Talking about doing
3
this.
people agree with one thing, 4 people agree with something else. So just the way it works. So and that, I make a roll. Can we have a roll call vote to end the meeting?
Commissioner Hill.
Thank you very much to Commissioner Campana and Mayor Pro Tem Reynolds. I really appreciated getting to serve with you for just this little bit of time. 1 year, 6 years is a long time. Thank you very much for your service. And thank you for folks sticking it out today. Democracy in action here. And get out and vote on the 5th. Thank you.
Well, I can clean up just a few things if I can. The master plan changes every 5 years and goes through a full review with the Planning Commission and up to the City Commission. So it is not a document written 20 years ago that you slavishly follow. It is updated every 5 years. And that's a considerable process they go through. It takes them about a year to do an update, and that does involve citizen comment periods, public meetings, et cetera, et cetera. This topic comes up now at least the last 5 or 6 meetings. I'm reading the City of Marquette City Commission policy. And this is the revision of December 17th, 2018. It's the one that's published on the website. Specifically, item 4, number 1, rules of parliamentary procedure. The rules of parliamentary procedure as practiced in the latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order will be used for guidance only by the Commission in all cases to which they are applicable, provided they do not or are not in conflict with these rules, city ordinances, city charter, or applicable state statutes, period. What that does is give the city commission, all 7 of us, the latitude to adapt, to change, and to make something like Robert's Rules work to the best as it can for the operation of this board. I would encourage folks that have questions on that simply to go online, take a look. I want to offer my very strong thanks to Dave Campana for the tremendous work that he's done. This is a 3-term mayor, a 1-term pro tem. This is a man who really, for the last 6 years, has dedicated his life to the city of Marquette. And Dave, you know, I can't express my admiration and my thanks for what you've done and what you continue to have done. Sarah, you know, we kind of came in a little bit offset together, but I did have a wonderful chance to serve with her for, I think, 3 years. And she's a great friend, great legislator, somebody truly looking at the best interest, not only of the city of Marquette, but the people that here certainly live within it. And thank you very much for everything you've done. Nothing further. City manager?
The only thing I want to add is, again, thank you to Commissioner Reynolds and Commissioner Campana. I've enjoyed your company and support for the last few years. And I know this isn't about me, but the commission that hired me is now effectively gone. So it's usually some kind of a turning point in the city manager's life or something, but I've appreciated and enjoyed your company and your support over the years, and we may not have always agreed, but you know, we've gotten the job done, and I appreciate that. And I've been instructed not to let this meeting go beyond 10 o'clock. Because then we have to make a motion, so that's all I have.
With a roll call.
With a roll call. So, but thank you very much.
We are adjourned.